Hello, I'm your host, Janet Garcia, and I want to welcome you to Max Spoilers. We're here at MinnMax. We're going to be talking about Life is Strange True Colors in complete detail. So if you haven't played yet, I don't know what you're doing. You need to go play this game because it is absolutely amazing. And then come back to our full spoiler-filled thoughts. But before I introduce my wonderful cast, I want to remind y'all you can get Max Spoilers as a podcast if you head over to patreon.com/MinnMax. That's Min with 2 N's. And be sure to check out everything we got going on over there. And without further ado, let's talk about who we have here with me today. I'm joined by the future class of video games, Natalie Flores of Fanbyte.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to talk about Life is Strange True Colors.
Heck yeah, me too. And also, you may know him from The Blessing Show. You may know him from P.S. I Love You. Or you may just generally know him because you know what's up. It's Blessing Adeyoye Jr. of Kinda Funny.
I love the twist on the future class because I was ready.
Thank
I was ready
you.
to jump in. I was like,
you were going to be ready. I knew you were going to be ready.
That was a really good one. We got not only multiple current future classes, but future classes here as well. And so like, I look forward to seeing both Janet and Taylor in the upcoming future class lists that go up on the Game Awards.
Heck yeah. And that brings us to last, but certainly not least, Taylor Lyles of IGN, who actually did the review of True Colors.
I did. And I really love this game. When you DM'd me saying, hey, you want to talk about Life is Strange, like on a podcast, I was like, yes. Like you didn't even need to think about it. I was just like, yes, let's do it.
I'm super excited because I've not talked about the game much since beating it outside of our Kinda Funny review. I've not talked about it in a spoiler fashion. And so part of me is nervous because I'm like, how much of it do I even remember at this point? I played it all in like a weekend and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess things did happen. Like I can't like pick out details. I'm excited to talk to you guys and have you guys like reach the details out of me.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this because like I had hit y'all up and in my mind, and for those listening, you know, if you're not familiar with everyone's work, please go check it out. Links in the description because these are like some of genuinely my favorite people in the industry. And I'm so glad that I get to work with y'all here on this show. And when I hit everybody up, I was like, okay, this is like, I felt like I was really assembling the dream team here. And like, I loved how slowly like over Twitter DMs, I'm like, okay, Blessing's in, Taylor's in, Natalie, do we have like, I felt like an auctioneer being like, all right, and going once, and we have the best cast for True Colors I think I could have asked for. So again, thank you so much for being here with me today. I want to start off with what is everyone's background with Life is Strange? And then where do you put this among, you know, Life is Strange in general? And just generally, what do you think of the game?
Who wants to start? I will
start. Oh, you want to start?
Okay,
go
Taylor,
for
it's
it.
all you, Taylor. It's all you.
Go for it.
Okay, so I love Life is Strange. I played the first one back in 2015, and I played every single one. I own multiple copies of every single game that's come out. I have platinumed every single Life is Strange game and I also read the comic series. You don't have to read it to play the games, but if you played the first game, and depending on which ending you pick, it might be a series worth checking out. Like the comics might be worth checking out, but I love the series. Whenever somebody asks me about it, I was like, no, you're opening up a can of worms, and I will talk to you about it for like 10 hours, and I won't stop.
That's awesome. So what'd you give it at IGN too? Because you did the review.
Yeah, so I actually gave it a 9 out of 10.
Do you think this is the best Life is Strange game, or where do you rank them among the other ones, having played all of them?
I actually think it's the best in the series. Before the Storm was actually my favorite, and then once I played True Colors, I was just like, oh my god, this is my favorite one now.
Yeah, it really surprised me. Blessing, where are you at with this franchise?
I'm very happy to hear Taylor mention that Before the Storm is her favorite because I feel like Before the Storm never gets the love.
I hate Storms.
I love Before the Storm like so much. I love Before the Storm. For me, my history with Life is Strange is playing Life is Strange and Before the Storm, and absolutely adoring both of those games. Both of those games being like. I feel like I played those at a very pivotal moment because I played those when I was new and living in Seattle, right, which is Pacific Northwest, which is where those two games take place. And I believe Life is Strange 2, I believe, starts off in Seattle as well, I want to say. And so I guess all those games kind of have that same lineage. But playing those that year and having those kind of like help kind of usher me into feeling kind of foreign in this new city and kind of on edge a little bit because I'm like, cool, I don't know people. Like I need hobbies, I need things to do, and like video games kind of being my comfort in that. Life is Strange, one specifically, really helped out with that and really was this I think pivotal game for me in my especially of the PS4 era, because that when I think back of the games I love the most in the last 7 years, Life is Strange always jumps forward to the front of my mind. I absolutely love those characters. I love Max and Chloe. I love the dynamic. I love the world surrounding that, and also just like there's something about, I guess, high school dramas in general that I'm just a fan of. You know, like you can throw out Degrassi, Riverdale, whatever, and I'm gonna be totally down to watch and experience that. And so Life is Strange really gave me that feel in video game form that I really appreciated. And then Before the Storm, I think, picked up on those characters and gave me even more story that, you know, at first I was like, do I need this? But then by the time I got into it, I was like, oh, I absolutely love this. And I remember how I felt toward the end of episode, I want to say it was episode 2, where so much happened and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe like this is the turn. And so I absolutely love those games. Life is Strange 2, and I feel like I feel like I'm gonna break Natalie's heart. I did not like Life is Strange 2 when I played Life is Strange 2, but I also only played chapter 1 of Life is Strange 2. And so,
you know what's funny? I only played chapter 1 of Before the Storm. So is it secretly like I have to go back and do it all? Maybe I should. I don't know.
We could do like a Life is Strange trade where I go back and play the rest of 2 and you go back and play the rest of Before the Storm.
We'll play our least favorite games and then we'll watch what happens.
Play like 2 more episodes because Before the Storm was the shortest. There was only 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Oh,
so I would have to,
I didn't think of that.
I would have to play 4 episodes. But yeah, I think for me it's twofold with Life is Strange 2. The fact that one, I just couldn't get into the first episode, and I think that was partly that game's story being one about like these characters and where they're coming from, and like that game starts off with like an element of police brutality and all the stuff that initially intrigued me, but in a lot of the execution of it just didn't land as well with me. And I'm sure if I went back to it and played the rest, I'm sure there's way more there that there is for me to love. But in the second fold of it, it was the fact that in this release structure, it came out really staggered. And so like I played the first chapter, didn't enjoy it that much. And then the second chapter wasn't there. It didn't land for months. And so by the time it landed, I was like, I mean, do I really want to go back and play this? I got other games, you know, it was that kind of thing. And so, yeah, like that's kind of my Life is Strange lineage. And for before True Colors, where I ranked this one, it's hard for me to say whether I like it more or less than the first one, because I love the first one so much. But I will say that like I would probably put it in maybe around the equal area in terms of the overall list. I'll put Life is Strange 1 and True Colors maybe beside each other in terms of my favorite games.
A cop-out answer, I see. No, okay. Yeah. No, I think it's totally fair. And I think it's a big testament to what this game does well in terms of people that have been fans of it for a long time. Natalie, where are you at with True Colors? What's your read on it? And what's your history with the franchise?
So I first started playing when that first episode of the first season came out. I had been paying attention to the marketing for Life is Strange. I wasn't a writer back then, but I thought it was interesting that Square Enix was publishing this game out of nowhere from a studio that hadn't been heard of very much, about these 2 very average, very realistic looking girls. And so I was like, that's really interesting. And I remember I was having like a bad week or something when that first episode came out, and a friend bought me the entire season because they knew that I was looking forward to it. And I think I've played that first episode something like 11 times, something ridiculous, because it was so comforting for me and like blessing, like something that I wrote in my review of Life is Strange True Colors over at Fanbyte, since I reviewed it as well, is that every Life is Strange game has come at a very pivotal moment in my life. So that first season helped me realize that I was bisexual. And I think I found so much comfort in that. I reviewed Before the Storm as it came out for RPG Site. Reviewed it pretty favorably, but it's definitely my least favorite looking back. I think I'm just not a fan of Rachel, so I think that has a lot to do with it. But yeah, and the second one came out as I started my internship at Paste Magazine, and I think I'm at least one of the journalists who has written the most on that game. Final Fantasy and Life is Strange are probably my 2 favorite series. So that's a beat that I cover very often, including right now. Before Wavelengths, since we'll be talking about it a bit later on in the episode, I interviewed Mallory Littleton, who is the senior narrative designer, and I interviewed Katie Benz, who voices Steph. And I interviewed them ahead of Wavelengths to talk about just that DLC in general and True Colors. And coincidentally, just yesterday, I interviewed Katie again, as well as Erica Mori, who voices Alex in True Colors. And I had a really wonderful conversation that'll be going up on the Fanbyte feed later this week on Sunday, on Sunday. It's like an interview podcast. So I'm still going to be covering this game until the end of the year. It's one of my favorite games ever. Life is Strange just has that impact on me every time that I play it. It's very life-changing without really trying. If I had to rank it, it would be Life is Strange 2 and Life is Strange True Colors are at the top, with Before the Storm at the bottom. The first one, still so much love for it. It paved the way for this series, and it's still so charming. But I think the teams involved in this series have really evolved over time. There's such a huge jump between Before the Storm and True Colors for me in terms of the writing quality, and the same goes for Life is Strange 1 and Life is Strange 2. Like, these teams are just really stepping it up with every entry. And although I am a bit sad that Don't Not Entertainment won't be handling Life is Strange going forward, I adore True Colors so much that I'm super excited to see what Deck 9 has in store for us.
Yeah, I kind of fall similarly with you, Natalie, though actually, fun fact, I never finished Life is Strange 2 either, but I really liked it. I'd like to go back and start from scratch and see it all the way through. And that story really connected with me on, from like the Mexican-American standpoint. The sibling angle I thought was really cool too. And I have like a really close relationship with my brother. So I often find myself seeing myself in those kind of dynamics. And, we're talking a bunch in True Colors, which is also a sibling dynamic in part. For me, I think True Colors is the best one by a lot. I was floored by this game, and I'd played pretty much everything in the franchise, at least a little bit, with Captain Spirit being one of my, like, kind of the hidden gem of Life is Strange. I feel like since it was just like a little mini one-off episode, it doesn't really get discussed very much, but that was having come off of Life is Strange 1, which I like, but looking back, I think that there are some issues with how they approach certain sensitive topics and things that I think could have been handled better. And it definitely has some cringy dialogue moments, but on the whole, I think that game's so fun to play. And man, they nail the soundtrack in Life is Strange, like that indie music. I listen to that soundtrack all the time still, because it's just so, like, the vibes hit. You sit there in the moment, you listen to the indie rock, and I just get really caught up in it. Before the Storm, I kind of was soured on. I really didn't like it, and that was made by Deck 9. Captain Spirit sort of reminded me that, okay, I think this is going to go in a really interesting place, and I think 2 delivered on that too. When True Colors was announced, and they had like it's Deck 9 and the power is empathy, I'm like, oh man, this isn't going to be good. Like, I was convinced that it wasn't going to be a game I would like, even if, we can always debate whether something's good or not, but I'm like, I don't think this is going to hit for me. And then I played it, and I approached it very hesitantly, but as, people like all of y'all started, your reviews came out, or your playthroughs came out, and were like, hey, this is a really good game. I'm like, maybe this is good. Like, maybe this is going to be actually like really fire. And the further I got into it, like, it had that moment. I'd like to hear from y'all, like, what your perception was throughout each episode. Because for me, where it really took off was around episode 3. Like, once the LARPing happened, I was like, I think this is going to be something special. And to me, after that moment, it was just all rise from there, where they were like so playful and creative. And I think it was just, so often with like story games, people, or in walking sim games, people have that criticism who aren't fans of the genre of like, there's not really gameplay. You're not really doing anything. And I'm like, this is such an example of where a team can get creative and create some really fun, unique, like lighthearted, playful, innovative moments in here, where if you play other genres, you're like, oh my God, I know exactly what you're referencing and I love it. And I think that's when these kind of story games are at their high. So for me, once that hit, it just kept going. And I remember playing it and being like, man, I like this, but I kind of wish they made it like more gamey. But I get they're not trying to, because it's a little bit more realistic. And then when they brought it to the moment where, oh, I experienced the kids' joy, and now I see the imagination, and then they used the drawing, I was like, wow, they really, really snapped on this. So what was y'all's feeling throughout each episode? And at what point did you realize this was going to be a game that you really were drawn to?
Well, I mean, I like, even like towards the end of the first episode, I liked how each episode ended. I felt it was like it had its own self-contained story, but it all played out to like a bigger like plot. But there was something I had an issue with the first episode, but we can get to that like later. But the episode 3 was actually my favorite too because of the LARP scene. Like, yeah, it was like light RPG elements, and it's like not like if like you really like RPGs, like obviously this isn't something that will probably rip you, but I thought it was really cool. And then like towards the end where she's like seeing the world through his eyes, just like through his happiness and stuff, I thought that was so cool. And then you had like that whole LARP battle where you saw the special effects and they had their costumes and all this other stuff. I thought it was like amazing. I thought that was like honestly one of the best scenes in any Life is Strange game that I've seen. And, I thought that it was really interesting what they did with her powers. I thought they could have easily kind of wrapped themselves in a hole where they did a lot of surface level things. But when there were times where someone's like emotions were so strong, she could actually kind of see the perception of like how they see the world around them, even though if it's not necessarily what's going on in the world, like she like sees like it's like walking a mile in their shoes, so to speak. And I just thought it was really interesting, like that one scene where she was like trying to get Mac to tell the truth, and then like we saw how he was feeling, and like he's like, man, F this guy, he beat up Gabe, I don't like Mac. But then when that scene hit, and then I saw how much fear and like anxiety he had, he was like worried he was going to lose his girlfriend, even though, depending on what choice she made, he kind of lost her already. And then, but he was like, he felt like everybody was watching him. And I thought that was like the wildest thing. And I loved that they didn't just make that just like, not necessarily a throwaway mechanic, but I felt like compared to like the other superpowers that were introduced in the first 2 Life is Strange games, because I know before the storm they didn't, but I liked how much more depth it went into it. It just wasn't necessarily like, oh, she can just like hear their thoughts, so to speak. It was like, no. There are times where it's like she sees kind of like what they're feeling, and it adds a lot more weight, and it made me kind of reconsider certain choices I thought I was going to make. So
yeah, that's the thing I really enjoyed, that I was surprised that I enjoyed that much. Going into the game, the things that had me hesitant going into it were the fact that, I guess the main thing that had me hesitant actually was the fact that the superpower was the power of empathy. And this is the thing that I think me and Janet talked a little bit about before the game came out, when we were on an episode of PS I Love You, Kind of Funny PlayStation podcast. We were talking about how I think Janet was the one who was like, yeah, like when they announced empathy as the power, I was kind of like, and I had the same thing where when I saw that was the power, I was like, that's kind of unexciting, right? Like that's not rewinding time. That's not telepathy. That's not anything that feels super interesting or dynamic, right? And I think I even had like the throwaway comment of like, yeah, I feel empathy, right? When somebody tells a sad story,
you don't
right?
reach your hand out, it's different.
Oh yeah, it's totally. I'm like, dude, everybody feels empathy, right? But like, I guess you seeing somebody's aura is different, like whatever. And actually seeing it in action, I think it was somewhere in episode 1, I'm sure. I think it might have been the interaction with remind me his name, the dude who comes over and gets to the fight.
Taylor just mentioned him.
Yes.
Mac.
Yeah, I think for me it was that same moment where like it being chapter 1 and you being early in the story as a player and audience member, you put together the pieces of, all right, like this guy is going to have an important role in the story, but even though like he's the bad guy in this situation, it doesn't seem like he's going to be the bad guy overall. Like, what is his thing? And like being able to actually read his emotion. And the game, I think the game has a good way of being very smart about telling you where people are at, because like it knows that we are smart as viewers and as players, right? Like they know where you're gonna stand with that character when he gets in that fight and like he seems scared and all these things, and they know how you're gonna feel about like basically every character in the game, because we've been through this already. Like we've all played young adult dramas, or I guess we've all watched young adult dramas or played a Life is Strange game, and it's easy to theorize what these characters' relationships and roles are going to be in the story, and giving us that like insider glimpse as they're going through to how characters are feeling and how like what this community is, I think was such an actually smart way to do it that I wasn't expecting. And so as we're going and we make our way even toward the beginning of chapter 2, which I think we're full spoilers in this point, like after Gabe I guess dies, right, you come back in chapter 2 and you have that funeral moment or memorial service, I forget which one it was, but everybody's remembering Gabe and going through the motions. I think that for me was very much a turning point of, oh man, this might be something special. Like I am really feeling what's going on here. And like I think the game throughout its course does a really good job of managing emotion and managing feeling in a way that I think goes beyond many other narrative games I've played. Like this game, I think really does try to not only push the feels, but it navigates that very gently and very well in a way where I very much felt like I could identify with the characters or understand what the characters are going through and all these things. And that funeral scene reminded me so much of a completely opposite game, but there is a similar kind of scene in Cyberpunk 2077. And that was my favorite scene in that game. Like I remember getting to that scene and being like, man, there's something service,
you know?
Yeah, like I think there's something about a bunch of video game characters coming together to like, I don't know, take memory of somebody who's passed away. And maybe that's just a human thing. Maybe that's probably in real life too, right? There's something that's just, I think, genuinely emotional about that. But also, I think it is a good storytelling moment of seeing, like, being able to see where characters are at, being able to see the impact that one character might have had on the whole roster of characters in the game, and being able to have that moment that feels I guess slow and emotionally intense, and having that slow burn of what all this is. I think for me, that's where the game started to pick up pace, and then from there, it just got better and better.
For me, it was sort of immediate. If I had to pinpoint a moment, and it feels really shallow in comparison to the very poetic things that Blessing just said, but when Steph flirts with Alex, I was all in, because it's like, for example,
I love this.
I'm
Such
that
an on-brand
easy.
answer.
I am so easy to please. No, but I mean, in terms of the powers, I think I might be the most negative person on the powers in this room. Generally, I do like how they were implemented, but I do have a few issues with how they turn out in the story. But I remember I was also nervous before this game came out, like, seeing people be like, oh, I'm an empath too, I'm totally gonna get Alex. I was like, yo, don't do that. I hate when y'all do that, especially with like the possible connotations of this being a story about a queer woman of color and how that is involved with the story. Ultimately, that could be more explicit in the end, but either way, like, Alex is a bisexual woman of color, Asian American woman. And so I was seeing all these people be like, oh my god, we have the same superpower, I'm also an empath. I was like, no, please, like, don't do that. So I was nervous about this game, and also because I didn't have the best impression of Deck Nine's way of doing Life is Strange with Before the Storm. But yeah, just like from that first moment that Steph and Alex interact, I think that was really special to me. I think something that is really wonderful about Deck Nine's vision of Life is Strange in particular is the way that they explicitly center queerness. Life is Strange 1 sort of accidentally steps into that queerness, and they sort of amplified it as the episodes were released. And Life is Strange 2 is a little more subtle about it, about the fact that Sean is bisexual, and the fact that he can romance Cassidy Orphan. But Deck Nine feels like a team that is very eager to center queerness, and I mean, you can see that by Before the Storm, Wavelengths, etc. The LARP scene was also my favorite. I kind of expected something like that to happen, because back when Before the Storm came out, every review out there basically applauded the Dungeons and Dragons scene. Mm-hmm. And so I figured that was something the team really wanted to hone in on, really wanted to elevate to the next level, and they did. So the LARP scene didn't come as a surprise, like just how magical it is. But it's still my favorite part of this season. But I loved everything from the beginning. I think I just immediately clicked with Alex so well that everything was sort of a joy, even at its lowest points.
Yeah, I like that you bring up the fact that Deck 9 does center queerness, because I feel the same way about Life is Strange's trajectory, where the first game, it was like, it felt very much like that is what, like, there was a huge queer audience for Life is Strange, so then they're like, yeah, and they kind of just like added in some stuff, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it didn't feel like super well integrated, and that's why, like, in my
at the time, I think it was very for them to do a game not just on two women, but two teenage girls especially, but also like making them queer. That was a risk that they took.
Now, in the first Life is Strange, I forget, was there like an option for Max and Chloe to be romantically involved? Because I think that coming back to the Deck 9 versus Donut and how they handle it differently. I remember finishing Life is Strange and then looking online and seeing all the shipping and going, wait, I thought they were friends, right? And this is me playing the game as like a straight dude and not even like thinking about it in that way, and then going, oh snap, all right, like let's go, let's see. And then
so you chose Arcadia Bay then?
Oh, 1000%. Because that is the right answer.
I was like, I didn't think the relation. I know I'm a horrible person, but I didn't like.
Taylor, did you choose Bay over the Bay?
I chose Bay over the Bay.
People ask that too. They're like, is it Bay or Bay? I
always find this fascinating because for me, after beating Life is Strange 1, I always thought the whole, like, my interpretation of it centers around the fact that the game is trying to kill Chloe. For people who are listening, are like true color spoilers. We're not spoiling all of Life is Strange. And so prepare yourself.
It's easiest to do. It's fine.
The whole game in Life is Strange 1 is telling you, hey, the world wants to kill Chloe. Like you keep stopping it, and like bad things keep happening. And for me, it was a story of letting go.
Blessing,
I find this fascinating.
The kind of person that just lets fate control you, or do you take matters into your own hands and save your girlfriend?
I take a hint. If my if legitimately the word like God comes down to me and is like, you either let your girlfriend die or I destroy the planet, I'm like, yo, hey babe, I'm sorry, we got to take a risk here. Things have gone too far. Yeah, but to bring it around, I think in terms of how Deck 9 handles it, I think you guys are totally on point because Before the Storm did center it in a way that didn't make that stuff feel like a hidden secret. Like in Life is Strange 1, I always felt like it felt almost like bonus content if you got to unlock the Chloe Max kiss scene. And like I've not played through Life is Strange 2, so I don't know how they treat that stuff. I assume they treat it a little bit more like a little bit less like an unlockable thing and more so of like part of the actual narrative.
It's more of an obvious choice, but I do feel like for that one, just to quickly interject, it felt very like, by the way, like, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, this makes sense because like this is a queer franchise, but it didn't. It's weird because you kind of meet those characters like on the road. It's sort of a different context, but I think it ends up still falling in the thing of this was a quick. Now we're here, and then it's A or B, and I think True Colors does suffer from a little bit of like A or B vibes and how it depicts romance, but it is like immediate, like that feeling is immediate.
And I kind of dig it because it feels like them going, fuck it, this is what everybody wants anyway. Like, let's just make it one of the centers of the game is the fact that you're going to choose between these two very obvious characters that you get to choose between. Honestly, like playing, and I know we'll probably get to Wavelengths in a bit, but having started Wavelengths now and playing an hour of it, it's very fascinating to see how much even more centered that stuff is in Wavelengths and how much it has to say about specifically Steph and that character dating in a small town in the middle of Colorado, and the game literally having an online dating element, and like going through the motions of like swiping through characters and running out because you're in a small town. It's only 5 people in that town were on dating apps to begin with. I do really appreciate how much Deck 9 leans into it and puts it front and center as opposed to it's like an unlockable cutscene, or this is bonus content. It's like, no, this is the character, and we know what you want as the audience. We're gonna let you get your romance on.
Yeah, it's like really well integrated from like that light standpoint. But yeah, Taylor, what are your thoughts on the romance?
Yeah, because I touched on this in my review as well, and so I always felt that romance was a bit of a mixed bag in the previous Life is Strange games. Like specifically in like the first game, like they kind of, I felt like it was kind of, Don't Nod was kind of like saying like, oh, you can romance Chloe, but there's also like Warren is also an option, but I felt like Warren, they kind of did Warren dirty, like they kind of. They made him as this like really. I mean, like if you saw his flash drive, you saw he had that folder of freaking Max. And I was like, and then you give him like you want to borrow. Like, bro, like I felt like every
creep hours, creep hours with Warren.
I just felt like every previous Life is Strange game, they didn't handle the romance factor very well. And I felt like they had a bias, like where it's like, we'll give you these options, but there's clearly one option they want you to choose more over the other. But they're like, well, we got to give somebody another option. So let's just throw this one in there. But then they just kind of do the bare minimum with it. And I felt, and I know with like Life is Strange, like Before the Storm kind of had that, but it was really just like only Rachel, but you could choose kind of like how quickly or how slowly like their relationship could like bloom from like a friendship to something like more. But with the case of Life is Strange 2, it was literally like one episode, and that was technically it. And I mean, it kind of changes depending on what ending you get, because there's like 6 endings. But
like
I also
8
felt
endings, I think.
Yeah, there are multiple. I think I've seen all of them too. But a lot of them just vary just slightly. But I felt like even with that one too, like, you know, there was one character in particular where it was like, they're like, it felt like they kind of wanted you to choose this one. It was like, oh, well, you know, there's also this male option as well if you want it. But like, and I saw how both of those romance scenes played out, and I was like, it felt like one romance was definitely had a lot more detail and care put into it, and then the other one was just like, oh crap, we forgot about this other option, let's go put this in here. But when I played True Colors, I felt that, and I know a lot of people were like, no, I chose Steph. And like, even if you just look at the stats, I haven't looked at them since, I think like 2 weeks ago. But, you know, I felt when I was playing this game, because this was something I was looking into when I did my review. As I know some people probably feel like they had that bias towards like, oh, pick Steph over Ryan. But I put a lot of detail and like focus into like looking at both of these side characters and like seeing what they offered. And what I came to my conclusion was I thought they both, you know, were very good and fair options for, like, you could really go with either one. There were times where I wasn't even sure who I was going to pick. Obviously, I picked Steph because Steph is my favorite character in the series.
Who would ever pick Ryan?
Talking in my head,
I'm about to hear some Ryan apologist content.
Yeah, it's
just, all the homies hate Ryan.
It's like, but like, I felt like even though there, like, a lot of people definitely most likely chose Steph over Ryan, I did feel that there was a little bit more of an even playing field for both characters. And I did point that out in my review, and that was something that I praised, because I always hated how they give you, oh, we'll give you options. But one option was like clearly a lot of detail, and the other one was just like
the
kind of
name brand option, and then like the store brand, and like are these, do these basically taste like Oreos? Sure, but they're a little off.
Just a little off.
Different.
Like I thought they were like dorky and like funny. Like, I thought they were both kind of like dorky and charming in their own way, but they were two totally different, like, they're two totally different people with like drastic different personalities. But I thought both of them complemented Alex in a different way that I felt like, and when I saw how the romance scenes play out when you romance Steph or when you romance Ryan, and I didn't feel like I was cheated if I chose one or the other. Like, I felt like they both were like very fulfilling, regardless of who you chose.
Ryan basic as hell.
Ryan's a little basic. I feel like here's the thing with Ryan, and maybe it's the way I played it. Like, maybe I didn't make myself available enough to Ryan, because I started off, I was pretty cold actually. I tried to play it the way I would play it in real life. So I'm like, I'm not getting with anybody. Like, my brother just died. You know, and so I like, for the Ryan thing, it's like, do you go for a hug or a handshake? I'm like, we handshaking it up. You know, like, I chose Steph for like the who's gonna be the person to like try to hit on what's the name of the janky woman? The Diane, yeah. Which also, quick thing to Diane, and this is probably one of my few criticisms of the game, like at points where you can see like, oh, where this is going. Like, who didn't know Diane was evil like right away? Like, she's cold, like she didn't feel anything.
Girl boss white woman. I've seen that type before.
Like, she's girl boss and too close to the sun. Like, she's got the blood on her hands and she's wiping it on the back of her pocket. Like, I could just tell. But with Ryan, I felt like he didn't pursue me as much as Steph, but maybe that was like something I gave off like in the game that made it that way. But that was one reason that I didn't find him quite as appealing. And I do think it's telling though that when they did Wavelengths, which, you know, we're delve into a little bit more towards the end, when they did Wavelengths, is Steph's story. Ain't no one wondering what Ryan was doing before we came to town. No one wants to know. Like, he's just, Ryan I don't know. He doesn't exist. He's just tossed in there. But yeah.
Oh, I said this on Waypoint Radio because I also did a spoiler cast there. This is like my 3rd spoiler cast on True Colors because I can't shut up about this game. I love this game so much. Like, you were like, we can go like more than, you know, a certain amount of time, and I was like, yeah, sure. But what I said there was that essentially I think what Taylor is really getting at is the fact that, like, a lot of romance interests in past Life is Strange games were really problematic. Like, Warren was a creep. Finn was cute, but like he asked you essentially to put your brother in a very precarious position in order to romance him, and ultimately you got a lot less satisfying and long of a romance compared to Cassidy. So I think Ryan's appeal here, they were like, we need a man who isn't problematic, like a romance option that's a dude and that he's basic and he's a himbo, and that's his appeal. But I mean, and I think a lot of people talk about Steph and just her immense appeal, and they're like, well, it's because we knew her in Before the Storm. And it's like, we could have, like, there were characters that we saw in Before the Storm that we see in Wavelengths and that we sort of hear of in True Colors. But I think it's to the credit of the writers that Steph is so magnificent. She's so charismatic and dorky and spunky, and the way that Wavelengths also, even without Wavelengths getting into her vulnerabilities and her trauma from, you know, her past, but like, she's just a great character. I don't think it's necessarily just like, people are biased because Before the Storm. It's like, no, like, it's, the last time I checked, it's like 75 to 25%. We're not talking about just a small bias. We're talking about Steph being a fantastic character. And honestly, for me, I felt that the game was very biased in favor of Steph. And again, not just because they were eager to present her like she's Deck Nine's baby. Like, this is the character that they created in the Life is Strange universe, and that has come to represent something really important for them, just like the present, the past, and the future of Life is Strange. But I mean, she's just really great, and I think her chemistry with Alex is so wonderful. Like, both of them are into music, both of them are into the same jokes, both are their vulnerabilities complement each other. With Ryan, I was never even tempted. I had already
I feel like Natalie, Alex, but also I feel like Natalie means herself. I feel like when Natalie's like, no, we like the same music, we like the same jokes.
I mean, I don't listen to indie punk, but I can for stuff. Like, I will do it for her. Like, she asked me to jump off a cliff, and I'm like, okay, how fast do you want me to do that?
Versus, no one wants to watch birds with you, Ryan. Like, it's like that's like the least hot hobby you can have. No shade.
They made him very endearing.
Oh, you mean literally watch birds? For a second, I thought you meant the Alfred Hitchcock film Birds, and I was like, don't you dare! That is a great film. I love that film.
To their credit, they made him pretty likable. Like, he's sweet and his jokes are funny, but it's like, Steph is right there. He's also
the son of a murderer. Okay, so
you also killed your brother. Like, let's be real.
Like, it just okay. So something too about Steph. Like not the last thing on romance, because I kind of want to just jump around to like what we're passionate about talking about with this game. But for me in the romance, I thought it was really interesting that like I really downplayed a lot of the romance stuff because I want to play it the way I feel like I would, and I don't, you know. And the one thing, and you have small limited time, but like I'm like in real life there isn't just like random available man and woman both into you, both hot, both. I'm like, this isn't how it goes, which I think Wavelengths is so fun because it kind of digs into the whole being single and the struggle of being single, especially being single and a lesbian as Steph is. But one thing that I thought was cool is like I sort of, you know, played it close to the chest a bit, and Steph still wanted me. So I'm like, she just is always down, because like on the roof, she asked me like, oh, do you want to go away with me and stuff? And I'm like, I don't think so. And she's like, okay, it's all good. Like, pick where I'm going and stuff. And then they asked me, do you want to hug or kiss her? And I hugged her. And I was like, okay, hopefully like she don't have beef with me though. And then when you get to the end of the game, which like, I'd love to hear what happened in your kind of ending and who stood up for you. I only had a few people stand on my side. But Steph stood
now he's
up
having
for
a
me.
breakdown.
No, hold on. It's okay. It is okay. Steph stood up with me.
You hugged Steph.
I did. But she stood up for me. And then when she came to my apartment later, I was like, okay, cool, we can kick it. And we did end up together still. Now, was I an F-boy in my playthrough? A little bit, maybe. I didn't know what I wanted. My brother just died. Cut me some slack, okay? I've been through a lot. Gabe is gone, and I just came out of a cave, and I just am figuring out, I'm gonna have to pay rent if my landlord's in jail? I don't know. There's a lot of questions in the air, but I like that, like how heavily she was not just pursuing you like in a sexual way, but like it felt like she was really there for you and cared for you. While like Ryan, like he's too busy watching the birds to really like notice what's going on. He's flipping on me with his dad. Like it's just. I was like, I'm glad I didn't choose you. Like, it was always
Ryan has a killer dad. Ryan killed your brother. And Ryan, at least for my ending, sided against me in the whole thing.
Same.
And so as far as I'm concerned,
Same.
me and the homies hate Ryan. We don't fuck with Ryan.
Yeah, nah, he's dead.
So, it was
An
very
interesting one. Go ahead,
for it.
Blessing.
Well, I was gonna say it was really early on for me where I realized that Steph was the one. You know, it didn't take that long. We did the record game, which I don't know if you guys did or not, where you had to like figure out
The
what
jukebox
record.
game?
The jukebox game, yeah.
I got it right.
Yeah.
Had a great time with that, and when I realized that she was a nerd, I was like, "Oh, okay, so this is an easy choice then." Like, I didn't even know that the romance was a choice at that point. All I knew was that if I can choose a character in this game to romance, I'm coming back to you. And lo and behold, it all worked out, and so it was an easy choice.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. So what was? Because I know you said, Janet, that you wanted to talk about like more of like towards the ending and like who was like on your side towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
So what was interesting about mine? So for context, I did romance Steph. First off, let me just say, before the game came out, I did play the game 5 times before it was like available to everybody. But I did in my first playthrough, I did romance Steph, and I'm pretty sure I romanced Steph like 2 other times. I played like I said, I played it 5 times before launch and then dozens of times after. But my first playthrough, I got to that point where everybody was like was at the bar, and everybody took my side. Even Ryan took my side, even though I didn't romance Ryan. But the way it was because of the way I did my choices, and I think it might have been because I was keeping a very even playing field, even though I was leaning more towards Steph. But the way and it's kind of interesting about how you can like kind of get Ryan on your side and like all this other stuff. And there's like so many. There was a couple other like choices too. Like I know with like Charlotte, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, everybody was on my side at the end, including Ryan, but I ended up with Steph. But yeah, so so it's interesting that everyone was like, yeah, Ryan was on my side, and he's also boring, so just like F Ryan. I was like, no, Ryan. I saw Ryan like defending Alex like to his dad, like he's sitting there about to cry, and he's holding back tears. He's like, Dad, just like come clean. And his dad's like sitting there trying to deny it and like yelling at him, and I was just like, oh my god. I was just like, wow, this man really just was like, because I actually thought he was gonna like turn on her, and he's like, no, Alex, I'm sorry, and then he just like walked away and then like confronted. He was like talking to his dad. He's like, come on, Dad, just come clean. Like we all know now, but what did everybody else choose? I'm curious now because I know you all said that Ryan was not on y'all's side, but who else was on your side during like that like scene towards like the end of like episode 5?
Yeah, just to quickly reiterate mine, because I don't know if it came through clear. I had, it was just me fighting for myself. It was me. It was Steph. It was the old woman. What's her name? I'm like
Eleanor.
Eleanor.
Yes, Eleanor. I loved Eleanor the whole time. Like I was always like
Eleanor pissed me off.
What? Okay, we'll go get
no because I had such a Eleanor is the lady. Eleanor? She's the one with Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah, she's doing her
first dementia. Yeah.
I helped her so much. Was it dementia? Or
I think it was Alzheimer's. I would say. Like she had
some dementia or Alzheimer's. Yeah, it was memory loss, but like it could be. Yeah.
Go ahead, Blessing.
By the way, I helped her so much, man. There was a whole portion in either chapter 1 or 2 where I was in her shop, like reconstructing everything she did that day, just so like we can figure out what it is she's trying to do. Like I was with it. We were homies throughout all the chapters, and for some reason, at the end of chapter 5, she didn't side with me, and I was like, what? After all I did for you, you don't like. Like what happened? I don't like that. That frustrated me.
Did you snitch on her about? Yeah,
did you tell Riley? Yeah,
did you tell her to Riley?
Did you tell Riley about her condition?
No, I didn't.
I don't know. Maybe you missed one of the air because I feel like
I didn't even have the option to snitch on her.
I didn't have the option either because you got to like see her at the bus stop.
But I think Riley did figure it out somehow, and I don't know how.
There is a way that she can figure it out without you telling her.
Yeah, there's a way.
So that must have been it.
Yeah.
Probably.
But I didn't understand why she wasn't like fucking with me because I helped her out so hard. She thinks
you're a snitch. She's like, nah, I'm gonna flip on you too. I guess I loved her, and she was there, and then I had the cop on my side, which that's always sort of a mixed bag to have the coppers. But I took away his fear, and he was like down. So I'm like, okay, at this point, I need everybody I can get. Now, so
I want to ask a bit about taking away the fear because I was so scared to try and take away the cop's fear and to take away
your own fear first.
Exactly, and then you take away. I'm so bad with names.
You can take Charlotte's
Charlotte's anger. Yeah.
But that's not good. That's not a good. That's actually like the worst thing you could do. But we'll talk about that.
That's what I did.
Yeah. So I did neither of those because they present you with the anger thing first.
Fine.
They present you with the anger thing first, and my thought process was one. You should let people process their emotions. I think that is a healthy thing to do. And so I was like, I'm not messing with people like that at all. But then also there was that double thing of, I don't know how that's going to affect me. If I take away her anger, is that going to build up in me? How does that affect my character? And so I let her be angry. And when I got to the cop, I did the same thing where I was like, cool, I don't know how taking away your fear is going to affect me. And fear is like a healthy, like all emotion is healthy. Or I guess like, emotion is natural is what I should say, right? Like how you feel is how you feel, and I shouldn't manipulate that by using what the talents God gave me, I guess. And there was that, and then also like the threat of what if my friends get hunted down by the man or whatever. So I was like, I'm not gonna take away your fear. We're gonna just roll with this. But like, I guess like my question is, aside from how that ends up affecting the ending in terms of how people side with you, did that like cause anything? Like when you took away the fear, did that make you fearful? Like did that fuck you up at all?
No, I didn't get anything like that. But Natalie, go ahead. You seem like you got
if you take away Charlotte's anger, she basically turns suicidal.
Wow.
Because she feels very empty. And so it's harder for her to side with you at the end because she doesn't feel that anger over getting justice for Gabe. Like she is just a husk. So yeah.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
For the record, I had to debate this because I played with my brother, so we made some of the choices together, and I'm like, what do we do? And I'm like, I don't think we should do it because like it seems wrong, you know. And I do think there are times, and there's so many like things to talk about in this, but I'd love to get your read on like even obviously it's a power and it's a game, but like the morality of like hearing people, like knowing so much about people, it kind of felt invasive at times. So I was like, nah, that seems like too much. But because the way she like worded things, she's like, I think they said something like, oh, if she doesn't, like Alex is like thinking to herself and it's like, oh, this is going to kill her. And my brother's like, we got to do it because what if she like kills herself? And I'm like, I don't think it's going to happen. But it's someone that's played the other Life is Strange games. So I'm like, I don't think they'd go down that route again because that was kind of toxic. But I'm like, okay, that's what you want. And he's like, I think it'll be also just a little bit more narratively interesting if we do that. And I'm like, okay, like hopefully my character isn't like super toxified after. I will say I got a scene where like either the same episode or the next episode, they're like trying to investigate, and I throw the glass. Did it?
You
Is
throw
that
the whiskey bottle.
Anger? Yeah.
Yes, it's because you took her anger. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did become like a toxic for a hot second, and then Steph dipped on me, and then I felt salty because I felt like she had my back. But then later, as I got more empathy for her through Wavelengths, I felt like I kind of see why that was like triggering for her. So then I felt like an asshole like from like a long time ago. But yeah, that was sort of how it played out. But she does become a shell of herself. The cop didn't seem phased, like he seemed okay, and I don't know if that's because he was fearful of like a person more than like a general concept. Because I feel like Charlotte's feelings were very conceptual, and she could acknowledge like the lack of logic and the lack of morality and what she felt she was feeling, but she just couldn't help it, you know. And also too, sidebar, like I thought that scene was so emotional. Like I feel like I'm getting emotional just talking about it because like her being like, I love my son and I hate him. I'm just like, oh my God, like this is too much. So I thought moments like that were like very well crafted and like very impactful, even though like Charlotte's someone that I just saw at the dispensary and I didn't really have a strong connection to her, but just whenever people were like that, are that vulnerable, like there's something so powerful about that, even if you don't like know the character super well. So yeah, but that's what went down.
If you love Charlotte, really can't recommend playing Life is Strange 2 enough because that game has the most complicated mother character I have ever seen. It's just, Karen is such a fantastic character. It's funny because I'm actually on the opposite end of all of you. So for me, Charlotte and the scene with Pike about taking away his anger actually highlight the weaknesses of this game for me. Just because, so in the first episode, when you're trying to rescue Ethan across the ravine, it's never about Alex taking away his fear in that moment. It's about how she inhibits she like lives in his emotions and then figures out a way to help him. You know, sometimes you can say the wrong thing during that entire scenario and it will visibly affect Ethan and make him super nervous and scared, and it'll affect Alex as well. For me, Charlotte's and Pike's parts where one, it was playing guard too much. I like Blessing said, you need to let people process their emotions. Second of all, I think the most compelling parts when it comes to the empathy powers are in episode 1, there's 2 moments. One is when Steph gets that call and she's angry over, the planning going kind of haywire for the LARP. And you see the way that her boot is stamping on the ground, and then Alex's foot starts stamping on the ground as well, because she's feeling her anger in the same room. And then the scene with Mac, I thought was really well done, because it's like, she couldn't help herself. I thought it was a choice at first, but it's actually not. Like, you beat up Mac either way. Poor Mac. So then these parts of the game are the weakest for me, because emotions aren't something that you choose. When you get jealous of someone, you don't choose to get jealous, or you don't choose to be insecure about how you feel. Emotions are inherently something that we rarely have control over. And so Alex having control over her own emotions and someone else's, and being able to decide, I can take it away or I can just leave it, that for me was not compelling whatsoever. For me, it would have been more interesting if she decided firmly to take Charlotte's anger or not, like in the narrative on its own, and then we had to figure out a way to salvage that relationship or to help Charlotte weather this storm. Same with Pike. I didn't take his fear away either, because I'm gay, and was just like, if I was like, oh my god, if I take his fear away, then they're gonna come for stuff. And then we just talked about planning a way to go together. I can't do that to my lesbian girlfriend. Oh my goodness. So, and I had told Charlotte, don't sign the affidavit, girl. That's like hypocritical. We're in it for gay. We gotta do this. It was super hypocritical of me. But yeah, those parts were actually the parts where the game leans into Alex being able to choose what she does with her power, more than what she takes from others that she can't help, and that she then has to figure out in terms of like how to work those things out. Those are the weaker parts for me, actually.
Yeah, I wish since they did approach it that way, I wish there was, I guess, more exploration around that. For me, I think the simplicity of my ability is to feel other people's emotions, or to like feel emotions through objects, or and all that stuff. I think that is an easy thing to grasp, and being able to take people's emotions away was just that extra element that almost went too far for me. Like, at the end of the day, I was fine with it, but also I was expecting them to dive in deeper in a way where it's like, cool, I can take somebody's emotion away, but that ruins them, or I can take somebody's emotion away, but that ruins me, because in this game we're treating emotion as energy, right? And energy never dies, or something along those lines. I think that would have been a bit more compelling, because for me, the Charlotte scene was so intense, and there was so much going on. I did like the visualization of you walking around the art room and interacting with things, and Charlotte's inner emotions telling the story of what she is going through, and having that come through, and then having Charlotte tell you how she feels and all this stuff, I think for me was so pivotal and felt like one of the bigger choices. And at the end of the day, I don't think compared to everything else, didn't really seem as big of a choice. But I don't know, like I wish that was a cool. If we're gonna introduce this thing, it is gonna mean a lot more to the story, as opposed to, no, she can just take people's emotions away, right? Like that is just a thing. And so, for me, like, if we're for my ending, I let her be angry, and then I let the officer be fearful, and by the end of the game I felt like nobody was on my side. It was me. It was Steph. Steph was on my side, and then I want to say one more person, but I can't remember. No, it was Charlotte was on my side. Charlotte was on my side. Yeah.
If you let Charlotte be angry, she pretty much
if you let Charlotte be angry, and then it's like, there's like a few other things you could do to kind of strengthen that, but I think that's like the big like kind of factor of whether or not she'll side with you or not. Like, I think it's like she can be on your side, and she'll have she'll have enough like anger or something to say something. But there's also like the one I got was where Charlotte took your side, but she didn't know how to help. And there's like you can actually change that based on like the conversation you have with her at the dispensary. So, like, I think you have to let her sign that affidavit for that to, like, and there's, like, a couple other things that you can do, but yes, there's so many.
I forget what I told her to do. I think I told her not to sign it.
If you let her be angry, she can sign the affidavit, and Diane brings it up in the conversation. She's like, remember the terms of your contract, and she's basically like, fuck your contract. And it's like,
wow.
Yeah.
But then, in the case too, where I did not take her anger away, the next it was chapter 4 where you're at like the festival in the park, and you end up talking to her. I forget if this is optional or not, but in my game, I talked to her near the water, and like we just hung out for a little bit, and the conversation ended up, I think, backing off of the anger moment pretty well, because it was her, I think, coming to terms of like, hey, like this is what I'm going through, and it felt like a good, it felt like a good result, right? Like it made me happy that I left her anger, but also made me wondering like, well, what would happen if I take it? Because it sounds like it's gonna be a bad thing. It sounds like,
I wonder how deep this lake is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Oh yeah. When she said that, like, she's just like, when, like, if you take her anger, well, first off, listen, it doesn't matter, like, it doesn't matter what, if you take her anger or not, that scene will always happen. It's right after like after you play the little concert, like there will always be that scene where you meet Charlotte, like at the dock. And so, but like, if you did take her anger, she's literally like the suicidal woman. She almost feels robotic, and literally she does say that. She's like, I wonder how deep the lake is. And I'm just like, I was like, I didn't know they were going to touch on suicide again. We haven't gotten that since like the first game. And it was such a curveball, but I was like, it was a consequence of an action that you made, because you're like, no, let me take this anger away from her and just let her not be angry at me or everyone else. Cause like she was kind of angry at a lot of people. Like she was blaming her son. She was blaming Gabe. She was
going through it. She was going through it.
She was blaming everybody.
Yeah, man. And she was still like at work. Like we've all had that vibe. It's like the sculpture's got to get done, you know? Like, and I love so much of like the things y'all have brought up here. For me, like the powers, my number one criticism of the powers personally, and I kind of got over it by the end because I fell so in love with it, like during chapter 4 and 5, that I'm like, I don't even care what was wrong. I just love this game so much. But for me, the powers felt very uneven, and I think that's what kind of bothered me. And I guess there's an implication of there's two issues with that. One, she's had these powers her whole life, which we learn about in episode 5. Maybe she's had different extents, and like maybe she's been at different levels of comfort, but they sort of present her in episode 1 as someone that barely has a grasp. He's like almost is completely overwhelmed by them, almost doesn't even want to have to experience them. And then like she's kind of using them at will as well for like more casual stuff, like, oh, this person wants this song played on the radio. And then now I'm sucking out powers, and it's like, how are you the same person as you were like 2 episodes ago? I thought you could barely even stand. Now you're going to absorb the anger of a woman who lost so much of, and you represent the things that were lost. Like it just felt very uneven to me. So for me, that was my takeaway on the powers. Hearing y'all talk about it, I now feel like it is odd to have that dichotomy of like the quote unquote right thing to choose, if you want like the best results, is to not take away the anger, but to take away the fear. I feel like those should be the same result, because if it's bad, if the lesson is like it's bad to take away emotions, it should always be bad to take away emotions. But it's like, oh no, take away the cop's fear and like it's all good. And again, maybe it's the context of those emotions, but it just feels like that's kind of
it feels like flipping
weird.
A coin where it's like this one's bad, but this one's fine, and it's like wait, but like what is there a story being told here?
No, I agree. Like I had a couple problems because I wanted to give this game a 10, but I couldn't. One of the reasons was first off the fact that we kind of like, if you saw any of the marketing, and I said this in my review, I was like, don't watch any trailers before you play the game. Like go in blind, because literally they spoil. Yeah, but this is a problem with Life is Strange marketing as a whole. They literally did that with Life is Strange 2. Like I understand that was like the thing. That's like the thing that kickstarts everything. But I hate when they do that, because it's like, because first off, that kind of makes me feel a little bit emotionally detached to Gabe, which sucks, because like Gabe was so cool, and I would have grabbed a beer with this man, but I also was like, I can't get too nitty gritty with this man, because like I know he's gonna die at the end of the first episode, because his death is what causes the story. But you know, I know like when you take Pike's anger, I will say this, like, because I've seen what happens when you take their fear, and when you take Charlotte's anger, and when you take Pike's fear, and when I took Pike's fear, I felt kind of cheated in a way, and I felt like he was just kind of like, he literally just goes, I'll see what I can do. Like he's like, what was the point of that?
All you really get is Alex gets home, and she like sort of has like a small, like literally like 10-second fear breakdown, and she's like, okay, we're hot, we're good.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, but also too, like I guess in defense of that, Janet, I will say, like, I know I can understand, like, and like I said, like, I have seen the inner machinations of. I'm pretty sure I have found everything in this game. This game has to offer.
You got like the source code in the back of your room. You're like, it's pulled up, ready now.
So I know, because I know a couple people also felt like too. They're like, yeah, it's kind of weird how like in episode 1 she's so scared to use her power. But at the same time, too, she's like later on in the episode, she's feeling, just going willy nilly at it. So I have a couple cases like kind of like offering that rebuttal. So first off, like the first thing is her journal. Her journal is literally the most. You can get so much context, not even just about her, but like if you find certain items in the game that you interact with. Even if you go through like early text messages before like she comes to Haven Springs, where she talks to like somebody, I think it was like a social worker or something, and you hear certain conversations she had with like an old flame, like I think a friends with benefits, or maybe it was just more like a regular hookup thing, and like she had a friend that I guess like her powers went overboard, and then she freaked that friend out, and there was like other issues too, where like there was like 2 journal entries, because like every time she has there's like a major emotion she experiences, she'll dot it down in her journal, and you'll get to learn a little bit more about the context, and it helps a lot with the story specifically. But there was like I think 2 entries before that, like that happened before the game starts, and I read them right before this episode 1 ended, and I just kind of got that context. I was like, okay, I can understand why she's afraid to use her powers, especially since like she was in the foster care system, and like in episode 5 they dive a little bit more about how they were kind of just saying like, she's kind of just like a high risk person to adopt, and like all these other things and stuff like that. But I remember in episode 1 when I talked to Gabe, and you have the option to either tell her like, yeah, she had a rough home life and she was hopping from foster home to foster home, or you could be upfront with him and be like, yeah, I got superpowers. And when I saw both of those conversations play out, but if you tell Gabe the truth about, hey, look, I got superpowers, and it doesn't really matter, like, well, you'll get different options, and I think they're kind of true to how she would probably deliver them. But the way he says it, he's like, I don't know why you're seeing this as like a bad thing. Like, this is a cool thing. Like, you can actually connect better with people. Like, and it's like what you make of it. And so when he dies and she realizes like, oh my God, I'm going to have to use this power if I want to figure out what's going on. So I can get why people feel that inconsistency, but I felt like there was a lot of optional material that you could read that helped paint a better picture, and it helped make it a little bit more organic and more sensible of like, okay, I see why she went kind of like from 0 to 100 from being afraid to use her powers to now just kind of go. So
on that note though, I want to piggyback off that and ask like you a question just really anyone can answer on how do you guys feel about how they handled the side materials in terms of like collectibles and information and like text messages versus like the main plot line of the story? Like, did you feel like that cadence was like done well? Because one issue I did run into, and like I didn't interpret it this way, but like other people I know that I've talked to have, so I guess it depends on the kind of player you were, but like when they have the sort of end additional reveal of like, and it was your dad who was in the mines, and Jed actually like killed your dad, like they were involved in the death of your dad, who was conveniently also this town. Like some people were like, oh, like I just kind of took it for what it was. I'm like, that's fine. Like they're doing a fun little connection, and yeah, maybe it could be done better, or maybe it's a little too extreme, but like I'm okay with it, because like I feel like part of Life is Strange is like playing with the idea of truth is stranger than fiction, or whatever the saying is, even though it's weird because it is fiction, but you know, they're kind of going for that angle, I feel like. So I'm like, oh, it's like a wild coincidence. But there's, if you like observe or feel the crack in the wall, you like know that Gabe came to this town to look for the dad. Yeah. So do you feel like, how do y'all feel about how they negotiated what the player needed to encounter and what the player could encounter, and how well that makes the story? I'm curious to hear Taylor's perspective, because like I know for me, when I got to the point where they revealed that your dad was in the tunnel, I was like, wait a second, my dad lived here? Like, what is this town? Why am I here? Why was Gabe here? And I somehow missed all of that, and I assumed that was my immediate assumption, honestly, was that, oh, I just wasn't paying attention enough. Like I can do that every now and then, where I'm like, especially in an episode 1 or in the first hour of everything before I'm invested, you know, I could be half paying attention sometimes. And so I just assume like, oh wow, I really missed something here. But like for Taylor, who's played it 5 times, right? Like, was that a thing that was like put in front of the player in a very obvious way, or is it a thing that's supposed to be inferred from like notes or collectibles or something optional?
I would say it's a little bit of both. Like, obviously with the crack on the wall, and with a lot of the optional material as well, I think it definitely kind of, you'll be rewarded a little bit more if you do a little bit of exploring. But I also felt like there were certain things that happened through like dialogue options that I had, and just like thinking about how things happen versus like before, like just thinking about how everything happens. I was like, this all kind of makes sense. Like, I quickly learned that at some point the dad was there. When I found out he was in the mines and he died that way, that was kind of threw me, like I was kind of shocked at that. But like I had the feeling, I was like, okay, Gabe came to this town for a reason. It wasn't just for any old reason. And I forgot what it was. Maybe it was a postcard or something that I found, but it was like, okay, he's here because he obviously wants to like start a new life, but he's also looking for his father. He wants to know where his father is. And I felt that they kind of presented it in a way that it's like you kind of have to go dig a little bit, but I also feel like if you play it again and not even like look for any items, I think you can just kind of like figure out through like clever foreshadowing, like this actually makes sense. Even with like the whole Jed thing, like honestly, when I found out Jed was like the bad guy, I was like, oh my god, that got me effed up. Like episode 4, I was like, then episode 4 was just like, what just happened?
Oh yeah, I knew they had to roll into the next one.
Why are you sad? I also want to hear everyone's take on like whether or not you saw it coming, and then just like what your reaction was to that too. But Taylor, go ahead and finish your thought on the distribution.
I was just gonna say, like, I felt like if you replay the game and you know everything that's gonna happen, I feel like if you look closely into every single detail that every person has an interaction with, you'll find that a lot of the things that's gonna happen in the game or certain actions they do actually kind of are foreshadowed, even with like Jed in that sense.
Oh,
and I'll save like the that for like when we talk about that, because I want to hear what everybody else kind of thinks. But I guess in conclusion to your question, Blessing, was I felt, yes, you definitely had to dig a little bit more, but I also felt like there was enough evidence that kind of made me go, okay, I feel like Gabe just wouldn't just choose this place just to choose this place. He's clearly looking for his father.
Was there explanation as to why nobody there knew, or did people there know that he was his, like, first of all, did Gabe figure out that his father was already here? Second of all, did people know that Gabe was his father's son? And like, how did Jed know secretly and he missed this? Like, did he change his last name? Like, what's going on there? Because I have a lot of questions surrounding that.
Those who listen to the audio version, watching Natalie, especially because like Natalie like mutes and unmutes her mic, so seeing Natalie being like nodding yes, no, maybe, and it's just like the whole gambit. But Natalie, what's your read on that situation? Because really quick, for me, I didn't know how like quote unquote I didn't pick up the breadcrumbs they had there for me until I went back and platinumed it, where I was like, oh, and if you look at this hole in the wall, he's like looking for my dad, and I'm like, okay, it makes sense. But again, I didn't read it as like weak storytelling personally, because I just kind of felt like, oh, what a wild thing. And I felt like that was in the nature of the franchise. But Natalie, what was your read on the dad situation, and who knew what and what was going on?
So it's not explicitly stated whether Jed knew that Gabe and John were father and son, but I don't think anyone else knew. I think in terms of that specific collectible with the wall punch that Gabe has, and like how you find out that like he's come to Haven to search for his dad, I think that's the one collectible that could have been not optional instead of optional. It feels like, I mean, I've seen every nook and cranny of this game, and I right now my hobby is to watch people play it. I love watching Let's Plays. So, and something that people tend to miss is that wall thing, and it is so integral to the story. Like the fact that Blessing missed it, it's like that's a really important thing. Whereas the way that my block and the text messages and all that should function, and does function for the most part, besides this one collectible in my opinion, is that it's supposed to flesh out these characters and flesh out this community without containing like integral parts of that characterization. Like you can get to know Steph and Ryan super easily and like know their characters without seeing their posts on my blog. But if you see their posts on my blog, they're even funnier and more charming. Or like you see the dynamics in the small community where like there's a post that someone's like, air quotes, because someone else is posting a conspiracy theory, or someone else is like, safe space when, so like people are like arguing, like typical, like a thing like that should function.
Yeah, it's world building.
Yeah, it's so fantastic. I think, journals and text messages are like a staple for the series, and this is the best iteration of them so far. But yeah, that felt like a thing that shouldn't have been optional, because I think that context is really important, because it's like, why did Gabe come here specifically, and why did he stay here specifically?
I think the thing you don't want to do as a storyteller is get to one of the biggest reveals and have the audience go, wait, what? And then like asking questions about every little thing, as opposed to like living in the moment. Because when I got to the father reveal, I was like, oh shit, that's wild. But like, what the fuck? Like, it immediately took away from it the fact that when I didn't get the hole on the wall note that would have clued me into like why Gabe was here, and the fact that his father was already here. And so I forget how I came across the information. I must have Googled it when embargo lifted, because I was confused, and got the answers from like the Life is Strange wiki or something like that. And I think that was my main issue, is the fact that like for me at least, who missed the one note or whatever, I had to go and do the research, and I didn't get to live in the moment. And like I think that was the only instance where I had that. I think other than that, I really did like all of the collectible stuff, and my block is one of my favorite things. I've grown to really, really love social media in video games, especially when it's done right. Like playing through Wavelengths right now. I love the dating app stuff. I love how well written and well done the dating app stuff is, and that does piggyback off of how well done I think the my block stuff is. And I'm coming off of playing Prey as well, right? I played Prey after Life is Strange, but Prey, I just got done with my first playthrough in that game. And that game is a game where 90% of the narrative, maybe like 98% of the narrative, honestly, is told through logs, voice memos, people calling you reading emails, you picking up books, and all these different things. I think there's always a balance there in terms of what are the multiple ways we can keep the player engaged in a story that we have to tell this way. And Life is Strange has the luxury of being a story or being a game that is built around telling a story. And so that you have those cutscene moments, which are everything necessary that you need to know and you need to experience to still appreciate this game fully. My block and the notes and the everything that you can pick up and all those things, I think do such a magnificent job of painting in the edges, right? Painting in the things that really make the community feel like a community, like really make Haven Springs feel like Haven Springs. I think that is the thing that all those things do that is special, and that's the thing that I think that's the thing that hits it, aside from the instance of that father reveal.
Yeah, I think too, like the side stuff, like the super side characters are really fun. Like I got really invested in stuff that like had nothing to do with any of the like who supports you. I'm like, man, but if you went by the ice cream parlor people, I feel like they would have went that, because I was listening in on how their business is doing and stuff like that. But yeah, those elements definitely really stood out to me too. Taylor, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna agree too. I guess, and blessing to your point too. I guess, I probably thought it was easier, but I can see why a lot of people thought it was hard to kind of like figure out that revelation and how you could get that because again, that revelation, while it was shocking, I know some people were kind of like, what? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But maybe it's just because I've played through Life is Strange a dozen, like multiple times, more than like dozens of times. So like I kind of know what I need to look for when I play these games. But that's just me. It's because I love the series. I know what to expect when I play those games, but I can see and just I can see why that shouldn't have been like an optional thing. That should have been something that should have been.
My thing is, I'm an eager player, right? If I'm into a story, I'm like, I'm not trying to search this room for 10 minutes. Give me to the next cutscene.
If you're not holding R2 the entire time and slowly rotating around the room. But I was a bit of a mixed bag too with the collectibles, where I went back and platinumed it, and I wasn't missing too many, but there was some stuff that I like, especially toward the end, where I got really interested and I just kind of wanted to round out the game. So like when I went to like the party, I'm like, oh, you can walk into the town. Like I would have assumed I wouldn't be able to do that.
Oh my
so
God,
I didn't even try.
Dude, I love that.
So I didn't see that till after. But again, I think for the most part, they do a good job at making that stuff extra and fun and not needed. And like maybe you can color your playthrough a bit. Like you can see so-and-so at the bus stop or something. But yeah, I think the wall thing is probably the only like misstep, for lack of a better term, just because I think it is so commonly missable. Natalie, I love that you bring in like watching people play it and being like, oh, they're missing the hole in the wall again. And just like watching them take that L, because I think it did happen to a lot of players. But once again, jump a little bit more toward the end. Jed's evil. Jed tried to kill me. Natalie, were you shocked? Did you see it coming? Did you ever trust this man? What was your read on the situation?
I didn't see it coming. When you, like Taylor mentioned earlier, if you go back, like there are actually a good number of hints that it's Jed. But at least I kind of like, they flew me over in the face because I was like, oh, I trust this like really good white man who is letting me not pay rent. I love him. He's so good. He was such a father figure, especially because he doesn't make you pay rent. So, and I remember that when he tells you, because he tells you, you know, I know what Typhon is up to. I've been keeping their secrets for so long. I'm gonna show you what's happening. And I feel like the framing of the scene makes it very clear what's gonna happen. And I guess I understand why some people are disappointed because they feel like it is a repetition of Mark Jefferson in Life is Strange 1. Because I was like, oh my god, she's about to get like needle stabbed right now. Oh my god, what's gonna happen? And so I didn't see it coming, but I like it. I think it worked. I think it was less predictable than Mark Jefferson because Mark Jefferson was very like one of his first lines is very creepy and people just held on to that. I think Jed was a lot more subtle and required you to look around the environments and really sort of, you know, question this hero narrative that he has going on in the town.
What was Mark's first line?
One of his first lines is, I could isolate you in a dark corner, and you know, and so people saw that line and they were like, oh my god, it's Mark Jefferson.
Now,
He's
see,
like targeting these girls.
One of his first lines was, I like kidnapping.
I didn't get this at all.
You don't even have to. Oh, go ahead, Natalie.
Oh no, you go first.
I was gonna say was like, yeah, you can dig around and like kind of find stuff that kind of foreshadow Jed, but there's actually a line, and you can miss it too, but I feel like most people probably interacted with Steph at the bar in episode 1, where she tries to talk to Alex about how Jed was this big town hero, and he got so cagey about it. I thought it was so sus, and I was like, oh, he's really, and at first you're thinking, oh, he's just a very humble man, you know, he's a big community man, and like he just doesn't want to husk all this glory and stuff like that. But then when you play it again and you realize what he does, and you're like, oh, he's being cagey about it because he wants to he clearly washed his hands with the sin that he did all those years ago, and he just kind of wants to just repress it as much as he can. Yeah, he just wants to repress it and act like it just never happened and move on and just never talk about it again. So
yeah. I'm in the same boat as Natalie, where it caught me so off guard. I was shocked, and even as he was walking me to the thing, it was when I realized how far ahead of him that I was, and I was like, wait a second, why am I so far ahead of this man? And like having that moment where I forget what the line is or like what the turn is, but I think he said something like, I wish he didn't make me do this or something like that.
She says, she's looking down and she says, Jed, why are you, her back is turned to, it's such a good line. Yeah. Her back is turned to him and she says, Jed, why are you sad? And the camera pans up and you see him.
Yes. It was such,
I was like,
that was the moment where I was like, oh, you fucking got me. You got me. And
it was there. I don't feel so good, Mr. Stark. Like it was like that level of like the darkness, spoilers for Endgame.
Yeah. Like
little, I thought it was
game Avengers Endgame.
I will say this though. Oh, go ahead, Blessing.
Well, the Jed, why are you sad? I think was such the perfect line to pull in that moment, and it was the one that immediately I knew everything. Like immediately, I was like, oh, he's gonna fucking kill me. He probably is responsible for this shit. Oh no, I was going through the motions in that 1 second of hearing that line, and I love the reveal and the turn so much, just because I think the foreshadowing is there enough, but like I think part of me didn't want to accept it because like chapter 3 is literally a whole chapter about how he's the villain, right? Like he is the final boss of chapter 3, and there's nothing that is more foreshadowing than him being the big boss at the end of that LARP chapter, and so for him to be the big boss of the game, I thought was really good. And like there was no point in which I wanted to question him. I think they did such a good job of writing him as a character that, you know, felt warm, but also felt like he was stern in those early chapters, at least for me, because I was really bad at working at the bar.
I couldn't remember anything.
Yeah, I didn't think about it. Yeah, like I took the order, and again, this is chapter 1. And so I was still in the mode of, am I gonna even play this game? Like, I'm just here for the motions or whatever. And so like I go take the order, and he's like, "What's the order?" And I was like, "Oh fuck." And then you know, I forget if I can cuss on here or not. But you're welcome, audience.
We'll figure it out. It's fine.
Min cuss worse than the maximum. So like, you know, I do that, and I mess up the stuff so much, and then he's very stern with me of like, you're bad at this, like this is your first time doing this or whatever. And I was like, you know what, man, respect to you. You tell it how it is. You are a very stern man, but you own this bar and you take pride in this bar, and so I understand. And so like, yeah, I just grown to really appreciate his character. There was a moment where he was T-posed for me in one chapter, and I was like, man, this guy's hilarious.
Yeah, that's when I got a T-posing glitch too. And now looking back at our text where you were like, I was like, oh, he's a pillar in the community, and you're like, you have no idea. That was foreshadowing so I missed
that was me foreshadowing. Yeah, so like, yeah, I sent you. So he was T-posed in the bar.
It was like before I played it at all.
Before you played it, and I had taken a screenshot of it, and I think I sent it to you. And you were like, oh yeah, he's a pillar of his community. And I was like, Janet, that you have no idea how spot on that is. But yeah, man, I love that turn.
I'm like, oh, I recognize you from the T-post. But for me, I only figured it out, or I suspected it really like pretty close to before it happened. Like when he said, you know, I've been keeping these secrets, like, you know, come with me, I'll show you. When he said that, and I played the whole thing with my brother, so we like talked about it. We passed the controller. We made some decisions together, and we've always been playing those games like that since part of Life is Strange 2. And like we do a lot of story games together when we can, if we are living together. Which unfortunately I am living with him right now, so that's been super fun to like bond over. And when that happened, and we've also consumed a lot of the same media. So like got like light spoilers for Goodfellas. It's a scene in Goodfellas that has that same aura of the fear of suddenly not being able to trust someone and wondering, like, it's that dark alley kind of thing where it's like, I think I'm good. And when he said like, oh, I can show you, and my brother literally goes, it's like, right now at night, nah, FaceTime me from the mines, Jed. Like, why do I gotta go with you? And then we got there, and then and sure enough, it happened. But I will say, to their credit, even though I kind of we called it like a few minutes before it happened, I was still only like 50% sure. I'm like, I feel like this is a little sketchy, but it could go either way, because, you know, he genuinely could just be, you know, it's an intense moment. Like, we just confessed all this information to him. Maybe he's like, well, why are we going to wait? You know, it's night, so people aren't around. But again, no witnesses. So again, and I think the line was such a good line. And I think the only like downside of that scene in a way is because, you know, there's a 5th episode. I'm like, well, she can't be dead though, or like I'm like, I guess I could make her a ghost or something.
Yeah,
like I'm like, maybe.
Are you playing as Charlotte? You're playing as Charlotte's child.
You're playing as Charlotte,
looking on from the heavens or something. But I guess that brings us to episode 5 too, which is 3 is like when it started to hit for me, but 5 is where I just was like emotionally draining with time. I'm like, this can't be too long of a chapter, because like, and again, I play with my brother, and it's all about like this growing up and having hardships and having like parents that maybe aren't like the best parents. And I'm like, and it's funny because my brother does consume like a lot of the content I do, and he listened to the Kind of Funny spoiler cast we did. And I mentioned like, oh yeah, like my brother's very much Gabe, like the older brother who's a bit of a knucklehead, who's kind of like playing this role that he's too young for, of like confronting the dad and calling the dad out on stuff and being a caretaker. And it was funny because my brother like saw me in our apartment. He was like listening to the show, and he's like, wait, I'm Gabe? And I'm like, yeah, you're Gabe, bro. Like, you didn't fall, the boulder didn't hit you, but you're Gabe. But I just thought like all of that was such a fun play on the supernatural, which we've seen Life is Strange get into a lot with like, again, the first game. And I think, Natalie, you're the one that mentioned like things being too samey from the first game, like some people's criticisms. And I think that's very valid. But for me, I kind of like that it had those drawbacks, because to me, it felt like Deck 9 really knows what makes this franchise special. They can nod to longtime players, but they're also not afraid to innovate and do it better than it's ever been done. Because when things got supernatural in Life is Strange 1, it was cool. I really liked it, but it didn't play very well. It wasn't fun to play. It was like this weird
it was done for budgetary reasons. That's like the difference. Over there is because they ran out of a budget for the 5th episode. Here it's because they choose to do it, and that's why it works so well, I think.
Yeah. And I love that I started like out just questioning, because they're like, oh, you don't have any powers. You're just like really messed up. And I'm like, bro, you gonna tell me I know? I reached my hand like, what was this not real? And I love that they did such a good job at making you as a player feel the way Alex felt in that scene of not knowing what was real and sort of just being in this weird state. But yeah, Blessing, you were going to jump in with maybe your thoughts on the episode.
Yeah, no, I was impressed by how they handle that stuff. Because for me, usually I'm actually not the biggest fan of those kind of sequences where it's like, cool, you just got shot. You just learned that Jed is the bad guy. Oh, you have all this information, and we're gonna take a detour and do some psychedelic stuff with you for like an hour. You know, usually I hate that kind of thing because I'm like, one, I feel like when you get into that abstract method of storytelling or back storytelling, it can just get messy and weird, and I find myself just getting way uninterested. But all the ways in which they handled it, from the kind of the back and forth of you having a flashback, boom, now you're on like a pillar that you're falling, that you fell on, and then you fall again, and it's like, cool, another flashback. All the flashbacks, I think, did a really good job of really cementing like what Alex's past was and where Alex and Gabe come from, and who they are, in ways that don't feel like they just come out of nowhere. You know, I think that's also another complaint I usually have, is like, I just hate backstory out of nowhere that feels like it's like a convenient, oh yeah, let's just happen to have this info dump on you and like let you learn all these things before we wrap up the story very, very nicely. The fact that it all felt like worthwhile things to know, which all lead into that reveal of, oh shit, like your dad was here, like he actually was here, and he died here, and Jed is the result. I think it all crescendos really nicely, and yeah, like I was very impressed. And I specifically, yeah, the scene where Gabe is confronting the father, I thought was like fairly powerful, and I think they had that good balance of me being like, is this real? Is this a flashback? Can I go outside? No. Like, why is it dark? Like, what is him doing the thing of, no, that's not, or Alex doing the thing of like, no, that's not how that happened, and then having to replay it. All that stuff I thought was very fascinating, and I was super into it.
That was so painful when like, and I think I think for the most part, Gabe was usually the one that called it out, or sometimes Alex did too.
Maybe it was Gabe.
Like, no, that's not how it went. And like, whenever they said that, I'm like, it's like they stab you, and then they're like, "That's not how it went." Twisted the knife, and I'm like, "Is it gonna be more?"
The one thing I didn't
my mom
get
in the hospital, not enough. Like, we got to do it again.
The one thing I didn't get was when I was in the scene where you see your mom in the hospital. I went and I looked at her or whatever, and for some reason, like my game reset. Like it was like, actually, that's not how it happened, and I was like, wait, what? And apparently, I didn't give her water or something. I didn't know exactly the thing I did wrong. And I was very confused about it. But that was the only instance where I was like, I don't understand what's going on.
Do they make you do that? Taylor, you might know because you've played it a lot. That's like,
yeah, that will always happen. It was like, because like, I forgot exactly what it was. I think because I kept wondering why they kept doing this as well. Because like, I was like, there were a couple times where it's like, we kind of had to replay certain scenes, and I kind of got that like episode 5 polarized from the first game kind of moment. I was like, oh god, because I know that's like polarizing episode in particular. I know some people that love the series hate it, some people love it, but yeah, I was kind of wondering why they kept making us do that, and I guess I was kind of like, I guess it was kind of almost like Alex is like facing her demons in a way where it was like her trying to process all that stuff, because like there were several times in the game, specifically early on, where she kind of is hiding all of that trauma, and she never really got to come to terms with a lot of the stuff that happened, and she never really forgave herself. So when we were going through all the motions and she was like playing the events of like how she thought it happened, and then it was either her or maybe the sequence would restart because it's like, oh, I guess that's not how it happened, or Gabe would be like, that didn't happen like that. So I thought it was pretty clever, but I liked how because I was kind of like, no, I want to get right back into action. I was like, right now. And but looking back on it now, I do appreciate that they did do that, because I was like, I think it gave better context about we knew she was like in the foster care system, so obviously I was like, okay, obviously something happened to her parents. Either they both died, or one of them was like abusive or something. So like, I'm glad that they did that, because I think that added a little bit more context about their situation in a sense. And I think it also kind of helped kind of lead up to that big shocking reveal, although that wall kick in his apartment definitely kind of gives it away kind of early on, but
Yeah. Natalie, what was your read on the kind of trippy past flashback sequence?
I loved it. I think it was so well done. It was what I wanted out of episode 5 of the first season, which was, them not working within those constraints of the budget running out, but seeing what they were capable of without those restraints. Obviously a different team, so different from what Don't Nod would have ended up making. But I loved that. I think episode 5 is a masterpiece. It's one of my favorite episodes in the entire franchise. I think it just, like, that, all those emotional points for me were, I wanted to see maybe even more of them, maybe in episode 2, since I felt that episode was the most lacking one. It was the shortest one. I think I would have liked to see an even closer integration of, like, to me, the highlight of that part is exploring Alex's childhood home and seeing the ways in which, like, her parents being immigrants, like her being first gen, like the ways that shapes the home and like the family dynamic, and like you can see so many remnants of her identity there. I would have liked to see that a bit more in the rest of the season. But yeah, I think it was great. And I think the water thing is what happens, because like I also didn't give her the water, and it made me replay the scene, and I thought that was part of the scene itself overall in the grander context.
Yeah. Before we leave from like this part of the game, I gotta know the Dido song. Y'all for it? Y'all against it? Were you like, this is fitting? Did it feel random? Like, what was your thought on the song choice for that? I think it was during the argument between Gabe and the dad, where she like puts the headphones on. It's a Matthews song.
Oh, I loved it. I loved it. Yeah, I'm a sucker for.
I like how I had to go Matthews song, but you're like, oh my god.
Well, I was like, for some reason when you're describing it, I was like, was it when she was falling? Like which Dido song? And I should have known that you're talking about the like Stan, the hook from Stan.
Yeah.
It was such a choice, man. I loved it so much.
I just loved the music in general. No, I just loved the music in general. I think Life is Strange, one of the, aside from like the amazingly beautiful detail in specifically like in the living situations of certain characters in the games, and even just like certain like personal spaces and stuff, I think what Life is Strange does best as a series is the placement of music. I love that they kind of highlight kind of like, lesser known like creators and stuff like that. It's not like, AAA, like a lot of, cause most AAA games, they'll put the, I wouldn't say obvious, but the more well-known, whereas like Life is Strange, they're like, no, we don't care. We're going to give you something you go bop with, and you'll probably put it on your Spotify playlist, which I have done. I have a Spotify playlist with Life is Strange music. And I love that they not only pick the songs that match kind of like the game itself, but they also perfectly play them at certain scenes. And for some reason, all I could think about was the ending of episode 1 and Before the Storm, where so I forget the song it's called. I think it's called Flaws or something. But when that scene plays, and then you see that whole ending, like I don't want to like ruin it for anybody who hasn't played it, but because this is not the spoiler cast for Before the Storm, but just like having that scene just like play out, and just like the emotion and the just everything, I was like, wow, this is just great. I was like, honestly, game of the year for just the music placement alone. But
yeah, I also think that's definitely like a tenet of the franchise. For me, it stuck out really harshly for a second, but then as I sat with it a little bit more, I was like, I mean, it is fitting, and like it matches like sort of the mood, and it is very recognizable. So it kind of grew on me a bit. I guess a couple things. Well, before we wrap up, I want to talk about like what are people's favorite moments that maybe we haven't discussed yet. And then before we do that, I do want to do a quick random shout out, because this isn't a favorite moment, but something that I thought was amusing when I went back to like platinum it and get like all the collectibles, where like in one of those collectibles you realize that, who's Steph, like a little bit about Steph's ex-girlfriend, or that Steph has an ex-girlfriend from like that town or from before or whatever, and who she played in her band with. And when I heard that, I was like, so you're out here running it back with me, huh? Like, you're just like, hey, we should get on stage together.
Sometimes it's hard to like, innovate. Sometimes if it worked the first time, it'll probably work. Listen, am I saying that there's a spot that is like a card game, a spot that also doubles as a bar that like I love to like?
Oh, you're one of those guys who has the first date place.
It's not. It's more like it's the second date place.
Okay. Okay.
No, I'm just
but yeah,
kidding.
I thought
It is
I
a
just
great
thought it was
play.
funny. Like it's not like evil to do, but like I'm just like, oh, this is interesting. I didn't know this. Okay, and I felt very much like at that moment that that Olivia Rodrigo song, the like we did that too.
The deja vu.
Yeah, I felt the deja vu heavy. I'm like, I'm the person Olivia Rodrigo singing about. Like, I mean, it's not the worst life you can have, but that sort of was like not a favorite moment of mine, but just something that stuck out. But yeah, people's favorite moments are things we want to talk about that we haven't touched on yet.
Shout out to you. I mean, we always talk about the LARP thing in chapter 3, right? But like, I think the thing I loved about my time playing it was going through the LARP stuff and going through the battles and being like, man, this is awesome. I wish they like went full out. I wish they had like the UI and had to be like a JRPG. And like the whole time I had that in the back of my mind. And when you actually get there and they do that, legitimately, I was like, this is one of my favorite moments in a video game this year. Like, I can't believe they delivered on this hard. And so I love that absolutely. And then also, I mean, back to Eleanor. I know I was frustrated with it before, but I really did think it was sweet. Like the moment where I'm going through and reconstructing how her day went and what she was looking for. Like, I felt like it was a very tender moment between two human beings. And so shout out to that moment as well.
Ellie, Taylor?
I think I got so many. There's so many.
For me, it's just any moment with Steph. We're going to talk about Wavelengths a little bit, not too much, because Blessing hasn't finished it, so we don't want to like spoil it for him. But I just think about how, I mean, Life is Strange the first one came at a good moment for me, like early on enough that I was like, okay, I had been thinking about this for a while, and this is probably the case, that I'm bisexual and whatnot. But I just think about the girls who get to play this game, like now, as they are, you know, growing into their teenage years, and just thinking about how special that must be. We haven't seen something on a mainstream games platform like this since maybe like something like Wavelengths. We haven't really seen that since The Last of Us Left Behind. In terms of, you know, there are so many indie games and smaller, you know, games that are doing so much work for setting the foundation and going above and beyond, like representing queerness and talking about race and politics and all these important things. But in terms of having that big main stage, to me, there's no series that does it like Life is Strange. Does it land it perfectly all the time? No. I mean, what will, right? But like, for example, I love that Life is Strange 2 is a very explicit, you know, exploration of race and immigration and heritage, while this is a little more subtle about that, and it focuses more on, say, mental illnesses and Alex's emotions and her queerness and whatnot. So, I mean, just like as a larger series, I think this is a series that like you have to look at every entry to see the big picture. And to me, the big picture is a series that really tries to be inclusive and to talk about things that are necessary to talk about. And I think this entry does that in explicit ways that were always really comforting for me, at least in terms of mental illness and queerness. Like, I liked seeing that there is a report on Alex from the orphanage and or the foster home, and like they say specifically depression. She has depression and anxiety and other things. But like that they put a name to those things was such a small thing, but it is something that you don't really see. And so, yeah. But also all the moments with Steph, because I love Steph.
Shout out to playing foosball.
Oh yeah, that was such a great scene.
I did not.
Yeah, oh my God.
So
Oh my God.
My brother
I was
put that scene
tearing
on.
her. I was tearing her up.
That's how my brother. Again, it's y'all's FIFA vibes. Like my brother got so into that, and you know, when we talk about wavelengths, there's more foosball and wavelengths, and he got like he only lost like one game in the total of this thing, but he would get so serious about it, and it was so funny.
Dude, I lost the last game, which was like the winner wins all, and I was like, man. It should have been best 2 out of 3 because I was tearing her up. I was just giving her the business, and the fact that she won that last game, I was like, all right, I see how this is. I
told this story on the Fanbite spoiler cast, but when I was playing this game, I actually I was behind
You
an
let her win?
hour. No, okay, so I tried to let her win, but it's programmed so that you can't lose the first time around. Like
Really?
you have to win.
Oh.
Yes.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
I did not
Dang it.
know that. So
That
when
was so great.
so when Steph goes, oh, that clearly wasn't my best. Like the moment that she said that, I shut off the game, and for the next hour and a half, I tried so desperately to let her win until I
That's
figured
funny.
out that it was programmed that way. And so I
Oh
lost
my
an
God.
hour of review time. I was like, it's midnight. I have to review this. I'm going on a trip. I have so many things going on right now. And I stayed there for an hour and a half because I was like, I'm gay and I want to let her win so that she could feel good about herself.
Oh my God, that's
That's
so
really
funny.
funny.
That's
Yeah,
great. That's
that-
my favorite moment, and I wasn't even in that moment. I love that so much.
It was so bad. I was having a meltdown. Like I could recite that entire scene because I saw it so many times. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my fucking mind.
Yeah,
'Cause I'm gay.
I saw it play out that foosball scene play out in every single way, and I just was like, oh my God, I just love this little nerd. She's just I would die for Steph.
It's
I was
so
like,
great.
as a gay woman, I was like, why can't I have a Steph in my life? But I would have to say,
Same.
I love every single scene with Steph. I mean, there's like at least 20 other things that I really want to talk about why I love, like, that are small things. I'm like, what? This is why I love, this is my favorite Life is Strange game right now. But I would probably say my favorite one was I know we're going back to the LARP scene, but I want to specifically talk about the part when you go into the magic shop and you're trying to get, yeah, and you literally, yes, and it's so interesting how you play that scene out, because it's like, it can go a couple different ways, but if you go the way where you read what she's thinking, and it's like, she'll either be feeling like either nervous or she'll feel angry, and if she's feeling angry, it's because you chose Ryan to, like, distract Diane. But if you chose Steph, she'll be like, oh man, like, Alex said I was hot, but like, was she like serious about it? So like, if you do that first, and then you talk to her, and then you have that proposal, that whole scene play out, and then even Ethan's like, yo, this is getting real wild. Like, I was like, yo, this is going from 0 to 100, literally. And then when you leave, and you get the thing you need, and she, oh my God, when Alex winks at her, I was like, oh my God.
Just saying, you don't get a scene like that with Ryan.
You don't.
You
I mean,
don't.
That's a good
They
point.
were Steph biased.
Well, Steph was
They
hitting
know
all the
truth.
points because, like, she had, like, for me, the reason I started off, like, very neutral on both is, like, also I'm not into, like, the LARPing stuff, but then the LARPing was awesome, so I was like, okay, cool. Now if I knew the LARP was going to be this good, I wouldn't have thought you were, like, kind of extra, because all she wanted to do was talk about, like, let's LARP together. Do you want to LARP? And I'm like, bro, like, I ain't trying to game like that, like, right now, okay? Like, I'm just trying to live out in this bar and have my life. But then there's just so many moments, and what I like about my experience in my playthrough is because I played it so much as I would have done it in real life, and for it to still end, and for me to, like, be with Steph and kind of come around to, like, see who she really is and acknowledge that and take joy in that was really cool. But yeah, they do. I mean, like, I feel, you know, like, if she has, like, the whole Halloween vibes going on. It's just like, yeah, I mean, Ryan, what's Ryan have? Murderous dad. That's it.
Yeah.
For me,
and also Steph didn't kill your brother.
Yes, there was also that, but I don't know. It was at the time.
I don't like Ryan, and I feel bad for him.
Rough choices were made. Decisions were made. You know. But for me, my favorite moment, I think, there's probably a lot of them. Like, again, episode 5 is really a highlight for me because I just think it does such a good job examining trauma in a way that doesn't feel voyeuristic and that feels personal and intimate and more soft than I think other explorations have been. Maybe even just in the franchise where they could have just made, like, the dad, like, a directly abusive piece of garbage. And even though, you know, neglect is also a form of abuse, like, there's many forms of abuse, but they show something that's just so much more rounded. And I think showing the complexities of, like, yeah, he was trash, but, like, he, you know, had the necklace on that you threw at him, which, I mean, they show him walking out without picking it up. So that's a little bit of a plot hole, but we don't ignore that part. You know, it's like, there's still that beat, that little piece there. And like, Gabe being such a protector, but then, like, he gets caught up in his own stuff and ends up leaving you alone, and then you're hearing the people's thoughts, and, like, they're telling you, like, what you think of yourself, and it's, like, the worst of you. Like, I think all that stuff is handled really well. And I guess, so for my favorite moments, one thing is I like the threads you see once you, like, play the game all the way through, and you see more and more if you keep playing it. Like, I love that, what's the name of her little toy? Like, little stuffed animal?
Shoo-shoo?
Yeah.
What is it?
Shoo-shoo?
Shushu, yes. Like seeing Shushu in those like old school scenes and then seeing Shushu later, I'm like, Shushu's the only one that got my back. Like I loved Shushu so much and I liked that. I'm like, this makes so much sense for why they sort of, and Life is Strange always does these kind of like the slow pan rotating camera thing. Like they have a very specific style. Even like the voice acting has a very like, you know, I guess I should get down there. It's like a very like floaty like cadence to it. Like it's a vibe. And I just love like little details like that. And then my other favorite moment is, again, Eleanor, best friend, was down for me the whole time. And I saw her at the party. And I love that, like, I was talking to her and I was like, so are we doing shots tonight? And she says, yeah, body shots. You want to go first? And I'm like, okay. And she's like, I'm just kidding. Or am I? And I like that too, because in that scene, you have like that dope ass skirt that makes your like butt look really good. And it's funny because you can get changed in the game, which I feel like isn't really told, but you can, if you explore enough, you see that you have a little drawer and there's like a little Easter egg shirt and you can change your shirt, but you can't change the skirt. And I'm like, they know what they were doing when they like made this. And then everyone there is just like, wow, you want a skirt? Looking good. Even Mac like kind of flirts with you. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm hot. You know what I mean? Like, and I like that they had that in there. It felt like playful and flirty and fun. And it was kind of like a nice little break from all of the drama and the weight of so much of the game, where it's sandwiched between like your brother's death and these conspiracies and the cops like it was just a small moment of peace. And I thought that was super cool. So those are definitely my highlights.
I also want to give a quick shout out to Haven Springs as a town in general. That's a big step for this Life is Strange to have it all take place in the same neighborhood, because usually Life is Strange you're going back and forth. In the first one you go from like home to Chloe's house to school to a random forest or whatever, right? Like Before the Storm has a lot of the similar elements, and then Life is Strange 2 is legitimately a road trip. This one, for it to be every chapter is in this same area and you're exploring the same space, and you know where, like by the time you get later in the game, you know where the flower shop is, you know where the record store is, you know where the bus stop is, you know where the bridge is, like you know where the park is, you know where all these different locations are, you know where the bar is. I thought that was a really cool way to approach it, because that allowed them to double down on one of the main themes of this game being community, and coming to a new place and building community with new people, and being somebody that is coming from not having community, right? And like I think that is such an important element to the game. And so for them to really build Haven Springs as a community of people, obviously, but then literally like a community as a place, and each chapter find creative ways to redress it, or in chapter 3, right, have it be this play space for this LARP, or in chapter 4, have the park, hold the festival. I thought the way they handled just the space itself was just really fantastic. And so less of a moment, but I guess like a thing I really enjoyed out of the game too as well. Yeah.
Are we ready to touch on Wavelengths slightly without getting too spoilery? Or is there any other thoughts about the main game that we want to talk about?
I guess one more question would be, what ending did you guys get in terms of who did you romance, and then who did you stay or leave?
I stayed in town with Steph, and we have a great life here in Haven Springs.
Yep.
Hell yeah.
And the bar's doing great.
I did the same thing, and I was so conflicted, because when I of course chose Steph, but when she was like, do you want to go or leave? Part of me was conflicted because of everything I just said about community and how I felt like Steph or Alex had never really had a good community, and Haven Springs could provide that for her. But the other part of me was like, none of these major people in Haven Springs had my back except for Charlotte and Steph. And so I was so conflicted with it, but I ended up staying just because I was like, hey, you can build something here, right? Like you can have a place of comfortability, and you can finally have a community in your life. And so that's what I chose.
I also felt like I dropped like a big bomb on the town. I mean, it was inadvertent. Like, I don't think I was in the wrong in any way. Like, things just happened, but it felt like it would have been a little weird for me to leave after so much has changed in there. And I also felt like, there's sort of that debate. It's kind of positioned to you as like, do you want to go out or do you want to like settle down? And while I kind of picked like the settle down route, especially like having my own like life experiences, I feel like, well, just because you make a choice today doesn't mean that's your forever choice. I'm like, maybe in 1 or 2 years we decide to get out of Haven Springs and do something else. And I felt like being able to be okay with like that fluctuation, like in my own headcanon, because none of that's in the game, but just like, I'm like, you know what, Alex can go on the road later if she decides it's what she wants, if like her and Steph want to be together or whatever.
here's the thing I'm fearful of. Because in every Life is Strange game now, they always ask you, did you save Arcadia Bay or did you let Arcadia Bay be destroyed? Part of me wanted to like travel because in Life is Strange 3, are they going to be like, oh, did you let Alex and Steph stay, or did you let Alex stay in Haven Springs or not? And part of me is going to be like, if I let her leave, maybe I run into her in a future game as a different character and all these things. But I was like, you know what, man, it's too far thinking. I gotta decide for now.
Yeah, I romanced stuff and I stayed in town, but I also, again, I had everybody on my side during the big kind of like confrontation. But yeah, I also thought it was just really interesting too, because like in episode 4, when Steph was kind of just like doubling down, like, oh my god, I'm so excited to leave, I'm so excited to like play music and travel again. But then she was like, no, I really care about you, and like if you want to stay, we'll stay. And I was just like, oh wow. See, this is why Steph's just
when she
she's
rips
the
up
best
the
character.
bus ticket, and then she was like, "Oh, I can just print out another one. Like, it's not a big deal."
Exactly. She's just like, nah, not a big deal. Like, did I just waste however much money on that? Probably, but like, I don't care because I just want to be with you. See, this is just like that scene. Like, if you do go the route of romancing stuff, and like the fact that, and then you end up staying, and she's still kind of happy, and it doesn't seem like she regrets that decision. Like, I felt like that was one of the best moments that showed like why I think Steph is one of the best characters in the series.
For me, I wrote in my review that this is like one of the hardest choices in a game that I've made. And ultimately, I think I've grown a little negative on it, a little more negative than I was when I wrote that review, because like you were talking about, Janet, theoretically, compared to past, like in Life is Strange 1, you either kill the Bae or you kill the girlfriend, and you can't take that back. In Life is Strange 2, earlier I said it has 8 endings, I double checked, it has 7. Those endings are absolutely gut-wrenching, no matter which one that you get. Even like the best one, quote unquote, which there isn't really a best one actually, it is still heartbreaking. But here, it's like, the choices that you make, theoretically, Alice can be like, yo, Steph, I need like some time to chill. Because like some people think that this game takes place over like a good amount of time. But my main issue with the game is its pacing, because all this happens in the span of a month. Like less than a month. Like Alex has the wildest 3 weeks of her life. And so it's like, theoretically she could be like, hey, so I want to lay low and just like take in this community and everything that's happened for 6 months, and then we can go on the road. Or they can go on the road and they can just come back and live in Haven Springs. It's like not one or. It's not that you can't do one and not the other. And so I think that ultimately makes it a weaker choice, even if I really loved the emotional context behind it. Obviously, I romance stuff. I chose to leave first, and then I chose to stay. I don't know which one I prefer ultimately, so it is still a really hard choice for me, but I feel like you can do both. If anything, since we're about to move on to Wavelengths, I do think Wavelengths explore stuff in a way that makes staying feel a little less unfair, or like potentially unfair, because I was scared of staying because I was like, I don't want to limit stuff. Like maybe she'll break up with me because she wanted to leave and I took that away from her. And I mean, she's her own person, she's a big girl, she can decide to stay in Haven, but that is like part of her dream, you know, to make music and go out there. But I think Wavelengths explores her character enough that the idea of stuff not rushing into things and just like breathing in and focusing on the present and what she has in front of her is more appealing with that context than without it. So I mean, I chose both and I like both, and ultimately I also at the same time think it's a weaker ending choice of the series.
Can I say one thing about one of the endings of Life of True Colors? So if you have the ending where you romance Ryan, but you don't have his like trust level enough where he'll side with you in the meeting, there will be an option where it's like, he'll come to your apartment and be like, can you forgive me? And you could be like basically like, no. And then if you decide to leave and you leave without him and all this other stuff, he'll literally be up on the roof and he's like freaking crying and shit. It's so you think of the fact that he plants a tree for her. Like if you decide to romance him, you give him the rose and all that other stuff. Yeah, like if you romance him and then you meet him at the roof, Whereas Steph will say, yeah, I'm about to leave, I'm gonna play some music and like travel the world. Whereas Ryan, he literally just like plants a whole ass tree for you. He's like, I planted a tree for you. And Alex is like, what?
I'm definitely, my next playthrough, I am going to romance him.
He's
and
really into
not get his
nature.
trust level up and demolish
He's a
his
park
heart.
ranger. Yeah, he's a park ranger. But oh my god, when I saw that ending, when I like, oh my god, I couldn't stop laughing. I was like, bro, I was like, this is look, I'm like, man, I really just like effed up. Like, you know, he lost both his best friends. Like, he lost Steph, he lost Gabe.
Hell yeah.
Any chance he had with Alex, I was just like,
I'm gonna play this game again, and I'm gonna be like, this is for killing my brother. This is what you get. Have fun with your tree.
Bad for him because I feel like Ryan ultimately gets shafted because if you don't romance Ryan and he sides with you and everything is well, but you leave Haven Springs, you still get that very awkward 5-second scene where he's on the rooftop and crying because he's watching you leave. And I think if you stay and he's on your good side and whatever, but you romance stuff, I don't know if you actually see a scene in the ending with him.
No,
yeah, you don't.
Like, you see a world without
fades.
Ryan.
Yeah, he just kind of like fades. So I don't know. Maybe he goes to visit his dad in jail. I don't know. But yeah, he kind of just fades in the back. He's all protecting trees and stuff. Yeah, I think they kind of did Ryan a little dirty. If you do go the route where it's like you either stay single or you romance Steph, and it doesn't matter really kind of what you choose. It's just like, oh, he just kind of fades. It's almost like they killed him. And like, there's a couple reasons why they did that. Maybe because it's like, oh, you know, he's trying to figure out all this stuff because like, oh, his mom's dead and his dad's in jail and all this other stuff. But I don't know. I felt like the fact that they didn't show him in any way. I was just like, what? Where is he? I was like, where's Ryan? But yeah, I just like, I guess he's just so busy with work, I guess. I don't know, but
you know how to, he's like, you know, it's my busy season. The birds are out. Yeah. One thing I did like though about the ending is, the little speech that like, they kind of having, I liked how they, just in the game in general, brought up Gabe, but not in a way that felt like too heavy-handed or done too often, where I could still kind of grow a connection with him despite him like having died in the first episode. And when he sort of gives that speech about like how your life could be. And then it's funny too, because like, and this is kind of a classic, like, I think they leaned well into the like sibling, like kind of joshing each other without it being like too tropey. Cause I feel like sometimes there's like two depictions. There's like the siblings who are like best friends all the time, or there's like, I hate you. And that there's no in between. And I like that it was overall a loving relationship, but one that had struggles and one that, you know, at the end of the day, he was like, it's like, oh, this is what it could be like, but I don't really know, man. It's whatever. And I like that he has that kind of jokiness to him. And I think it really speaks to like their relationship and his character really well. I'll agree that the weight isn't quite as much. And to bring it back to like something Blessing said like an hour ago with like the taking emotions away and stuff, I do think maybe one of the lower parts of the game is the fact that there aren't really a lot of choices that I felt like I had to really think about, versus in other Life is Strange games, they'd be very, you know, that classic dramatic doom, and then everything slows down and you're like, oh, what do I do? But this felt like I kind of knew my answers right away because I didn't get a lot of conflicted things. I'm like, don't sign it because I don't think it's good to sign. Like, I didn't have a lot of moments of big internal conflict, which I think it could have stood to have more of. But all right, Wavelengths. This is us selling Wavelengths, basically. I loved Wavelengths. I did beat it. It's like 2.5 hours. We won't go into like much heavy spoilers because Blessing hasn't beaten it, but I thought it did a really good job. It all takes place in the record store. You play as Steph. So you're just doing your job as the radio DJ and also the like manager of the record store. So you're doing like sort of some mundane tasks and running the show and taking calls and things. And I do think that even though the things you do are inherently like repetitive, especially like running the radio show, it's like you always read ads and you always answer calls and like you might put on a song and maybe you'll check your phone. I think the variety for me was just in the way those things were executed, where I don't know what that call is going to be and like what's going to come through a radio show. I'm excited by like the slice of life, putting on what album I want. And the ads, like they're always for the same businesses because it's a small town. There's like 5 businesses, 4 of them paid for ads. But I like that she always changes up what she's saying and it gives you some like dialogue choice and like, oh, come to Black Lantern. It's got amazing food or great. I mean, it's way more fun written than that. That's just like my bad reading of Steph's character for those ad reads. But I really like that element of it. And I like that it's kind of an exploration of, it's very introspective on Steph. And I feel like I really related to being someone who's delved in work. We're out here just doing the show, you know, like kind of you looking for love through the phone. Like, I feel like it's a very like modern, like in terms of modern romance and content creation, I was like, I'm right there with you, Steph. And there's even like, I took some clips from it because she'll do like, and she have like a task, like to-do list for the workday. And she'll do like 2 things. And she's like, oh, time to take a break. And I'm like, girl, I'd be like that too. I'm like, oh, 1 podcast, time to lay down for 3 hours. So I just found stuff like that really charming. And I felt like it was a great look at what it means to start out somewhere else and to kind of be leaving things behind and trying to like formulate who you are in a new place. And it also like tied in a lot of things from characters you already knew. I thought I did a good job at like nodding to the main game without being like, I'm going to go to the flower shop or I'm going to do the same things. Like, it didn't feel like, oh, this is Alex, like as a reskin character. It was like, no, this is Steph's experience and it's an isolated experience. And sometimes it's a little bit lonely. Sometimes it's a little sad. Sometimes it's funny. I was in love with that glitter lamp. I'm like, you can change the color. Like, I really love little sim stuff like that. So I was really enamored with it. And I thought I was very impressed at how well paced it was. Again, only 2.5 hours. They go through like several seasons. I'm like, this is a whole thought. And like, I said this on, gosh, I don't remember if it was what podcast it was on, because every podcast I go on, I'm talking about Life is Strange. But I mentioned that I'm like, I swear, like after watching Marvel What If, I'm like, Marvel, take note at how you pace a story. Like, it's not, you know, like I was just blown away by the execution of that. But what was y'all's read on Wavelengths?
Only being about an hour in, I'm pretty much where you're at in terms of how much it is, I think, relatable. Especially like I put out a tweet yesterday of like, yo, this is Wavelengths is a game about a media host who is new to a town, who feels isolated, who like is doing ad reads and shit, and like is doing online dating as a way to kind of connect to the people around her or connect to her community. And legitimately, I'm like, being an hour in, I'm like, this is hitting way too close. This is hitting way too close. Like doing the ad reads and having the ad libs that you add in there, or like it reminds me so much of formulating my ad reads for Kind of Funny, where I am like, all right, cool. Okay, I have to say something personal about it because it's required for every ad read. All right, what's my experience with DoorDash or whatever, and like figuring out what the ad load is going to be this time. You know, and figuring out the show notes now, or the to-do list and all that stuff. I thought so far has been so fun, and I'm with you in terms of like the simmy aspect of it, of getting to, you know, decide like the lamp light, because now for me, when somebody calls in for a reading, I always turn the lamp purple. Like that is the purple reading color. Like I have like a routine that I'm in right now, and I totally love it. And you know, my favorite thing is like the online dating, because I feel like this is some of the most accurate online dating I've had in a video game, like in terms of both like running into bots and like the first message being, hey beautiful, and going, you're a bot, and then they'd be like,
bio, like there's so much accuracy.
The lack of bio, like getting to the profile of like the 42-year-old 2 kids and going, nah, and then like scrolling left, and like, you know, like there's so much I think good detail and good nuance in the dating app stuff that I totally adore it. And yeah, like I think overall, at least for me being an hour into it, I'm super into it, and I can't wait to get back to it.
Any other Wavelengths?
Taylor, do you want to go first? Or?
Taylor and Natalie?
Yeah, I'll go first, Natalie. Yeah, I really liked it. Like I said, Steph's my favorite character in the series, and when I heard they were making a DLC all about her, I was like, oh, this is about to be the Steph show now! And, you know, I like that it was set like a year before like she came, and like I know like they kind of explored a little bit about her being in this town and being like kind of like somewhat new and stuff like that. And, you know, I thought it was interesting that if you do find that like button of her having that conversation with like her ex-girlfriend, and how she wanted to like, she's like, yeah, you know, this place is kind of like chill. Like, I kind of just stay here, just see what happens. But then you also see the side of her in Wavelengths where she's like, you know, she's glad that she's having a change of pace in her life, but at the same time too, she's like nervous as heck that she's just like, what did I just do? And I love that, you know, you spend this whole year and she kind of just like starts like transitions the record store into like her own like kind of like sanctuary, the way she just kind of like gets more comfortable with like the groove, and how she kind of just starts like building relationships with some of the townsfolk like Gabe and Ryan. And I love that it also wasn't afraid to explore about, because when I was excited most about Wavelengths was the fact that I was like, okay, we don't know much about Steph after like the events of Before the Storm, and I was like, what happened before that? Like, I know we get kind of like that gist, but I was like, I want to know kind of like, especially like with what happened in the first game. It doesn't even matter which ending you choose. It's just like, I want to know like how that impacted her. Like, I want to know how was her relationship with Mikey still okay? Because like they were just like the most adorable little duo at Blackwell. And I love that they weren't afraid to kind of like bring back her past, and like how they were able to do it in a way where it's like, no, it's still tying into the games because it's the shared universe. And I love that they explored that. So she has anxieties kind of confronting her past and like the people she lost in that storm. At the same time too, she's got this anxiety of moving into a town where she doesn't know anybody, and then she's single and she's like trying to date again, but there's like only like 3 lesbians in town, so it's like she's got slim pickings here. So I love that it showed so much vulnerability of Steph as a character, because like even in True Colors, like she was just, for the most time, like a majority of the time, she was just this very confident woman. She could direct the room if she wanted to. And even in Before the Storm, you know, she was still like that kind of like confident person where it was like, yeah, you know, I'm just this little lesbian nerd that loves like, you know, D&D and stuff. But I love that they showed a side of her that kind of made her a lot more vulnerable, a lot more relatable, and kind of dives a little bit deep into some of those issues that people like her kind of have, especially like being a gay woman in a small town, like, and having those growing pains. Like, I loved that. I just loved everything about it. It's probably one of my favorite pieces of DLC I've played in a long time.
I think Steph's character needed wavelengths. Like you said, she was fantastic and super charming in True Colors, but she needed this level of vulnerability. I also really love what you said about just the way that this is technically the first time in the series where we see how our choices impacted someone who wasn't involved in those choices, but still had to deal with the ramifications of what we chose to do. The series has not done that before this, and I think that was so interesting, and actually made me feel bad for destroying the town for a bit. Like, not enough to like actually save the town and instead of Chloe, but like enough that I was like, ah, shit, that sucks. Like, damn.
I feel like her life was bad either way, because I did save the town, and she's still like, it's rough out here.
Still,
there's other forms of trauma.
Yeah,
so,
she
anyway,
still deals with her trauma. And for me, what I take away from Wavelengths is that, like, I don't know if it will fully get the credit that it deserves for doing this. But something that I talked about with Mallory Littleton, who was a senior narrative designer on True Colors and also with the Wavelengths DLC, I talked to her about how important this is as a queer woman to see, and how like so often we get sort of a hesitation from creators when doing inclusivity, because they're like, oh, we don't want, for example, we don't want someone's queerness to be everything about that character, right? Like, it kind of then leans into people taking less risks with inclusivity, I feel. And so this DLC, I think, is just such an excellent example of how the fault doesn't lie in the concept of being inclusive and showing diversity, because this DLC gay as hell. Like, the Pride, there's an entire season that is just about Pride, that goes over Steph's experiences attending queer parades and Pride festivals and whatnot, and riots and all that stuff. And it explicitly, like, people call in, and half of the shit that they say is about, like, being queer or having a gay son or something like that. And it's like, it's not the fault. The fault doesn't lie with the concept of centering someone's race or their queerness or their gender. It's about what the writers actually contribute to that character, because there's so much to Steph aside from this, and that's because the writers put in the effort to make her a whole person. But that's not the fault of the notion behind them being like, okay, we're just gonna make this gay as hell. Like, yeah, obviously it's gay as hell, and there's more to her character besides her queerness. And it's like, I think it was brave, I think, of them to really make this so explicitly queer, but to also be like, hey, like this is part of stuff, and like if you're not okay with that, then like this DLC just isn't for you. And
I can't imagine anyone playing Life is Strange where they're like, oh, I'm not for like the LGBTQ community, because that is so much of the DNA of this franchise. And I think you stated it so beautifully, Natalie, to say that there's nothing inherently wrong with centering a story, at least in part, or a character in part, on part of one of their marginalized identities, as long as you can flesh it out in like the right way. And I think that's what I love so much about True Colors, where I think the franchise over the years has struggled to get its footing on how do we tackle queerness and how do we tackle mental health issues. Two things that I find highly relatable, like in my like life experience. And I feel like this was such a master class in doing those things. It never felt like, oh, this is completely just about Alex's mental health, or this is completely about Alex being queer, or this is completely about any of those elements. And I think what's so cool about Wavelengths is, even with it, like you said, even with it being, way more, this is straight up just a gay story, because it's Steph. She's lesbian. She's not bisexual. She's not, everyone's kind of conveniently bisexual to give more of like the free reign for a player. But it's like, nope, this is Steph's character. This is who she is. And she's very established. And you are still making choices, but not in the same way where like I can't project who I am onto Steph. Like the most I can do is like on the ad reads or something. But I still feel like I enjoyed my time with it because it was just so well done. And it made it so that the thing I was invested in isn't in how the story would play out. It was learning more about Steph. And I think that's what's so beautifully done about this. I feel like it helped inform my perspective on the main game. It helped inform my perspective on the series. Like the way they're able to balance all of those pieces, it feels like Wavelengths is the first time that Life is Strange to me is really in its bag and fully hit its stride. It knows what it is, it knows what it does, and it's doing it well. Much like Taylor, I probably also wouldn't like rank this as a masterpiece, but the thought crosses your mind at least for a second, even if it's just for a second, where because it hits that hard when it reaches those highs. And yeah, I'm just so enamored with it. I do feel like when she was putting down the Pride stuff, she's like, time to put away the Pride stuff because June's over. And there's like a lot of like fun things about like her thinking back to when she was 13 and she was like barely came out, and she's like, oh my God, I wish I dressed cooler, which I felt like was so relatable, because there is a lot of like those conversations in like the queer community about, am I visibly queer enough? Like, are people going to know? And also like, am I like a poser myself? And like, it's just a part, it's such a common part. And then like the cliches of like, oh, you got your pants rolled up, like you're obviously bisexual. Like there's so many things with queerness and fashion and visibility and trying to figure out how to own your own queerness. And I like that they give that little window where someone, affirms her existence there. And later you see her doing that same affirmation to people calling in. And like, she even has like someone who calls in about like bullying. And she's like, maybe for you, it's not queerness. Maybe it is for me. It's like when I came out that I kind of came into my own and I was own who I was, and like so many great moments like that. But I'm like, why can't you just leave some of the Pride stuff up? Like, I don't know. I leave like plenty of decorations up out of season. So I'm kind of sad that like it didn't have that element of her leaving at least like part of something there, like just to kind of take away, like not take away from that joy that she did have. But I love, anyone that's part of any marginalized identity can at least partially, I think, relate to the idea of having that moment where you feel like it's not that I don't feel like I belong all the other times, but now I feel like I do. I feel like that's kind of the thing where like for her talking about Pride, it's like, it's not that I'm not okay where I am all the time, but this is where I'm truly like connected with people who are like me. And yeah, that just hits so well. It's such a good DLC. I love it. I'm not a fan of DLC generally, but when I saw this, I was like literally like straight up, I beat this game. This is like a testament to how much I love Wavelengths. I was like, Steph's story. I looked at my brother. It was like 1 a.m. when we beat the game. I was like, want to check out Steph's story? I mean, it's dropping later on. It's like, I gotta play the DLC. And then I literally like took out my phone. I'm like, Life is Strange Wavelengths merch. I'm like, Haven City? Like my brother felt the same way about it too. And he's like, I'm gonna change my location on Twitter to is it Haven? Am I feeling
Haven Springs? Yeah, Haven Springs.
Haven City's from Jack too. Yeah, Haven Springs, like location. Like, I just absolutely adore this. But yeah, if you're listening to this, please go play Wavelengths because I think it's fantastic. Any other thoughts before we close out on Wavelengths or True Colors?
I think this was just a really good game, and I feel like this is what the series needed because the first game had such a high, and like I think a lot of people put the first game on such a pedestal. The second game is really divisive. I mean, personally, I didn't like it, but I have a lot of reasons why I didn't like Life is Strange 2. But I think that this is what the series needed. I think they needed to have this kind of like momentum, and then they build off that momentum with the base game. Then you play Wavelengths, they're just like blew me away. And because I know a lot of people were apprehensive that Deck 9 was kind of making the next Life is Strange game, but I was really excited because I was like, again, because Before the Storm was like my favorite, but at the same time too, I felt like after the first Life is Strange game, I felt like every game Dontnod has made after Life is Strange kind of was like, I'm like, it's okay. Like, tell me why I felt like that. Like, I was so excited for that game last year. And
tell me why either.
I read your review of that, and like,
yay.
I felt those same exact feelings too. And like, there was so much that they introduced, and then they kind of just went like nowhere with it. It was like, I don't know if they felt forced. I don't know if they just didn't get enough money to like do this. I was just like, what is this? Because it's like, I felt like, first off, I felt 3 episodes was not enough for whatever it was they were trying to execute with that game. And then I played another Dontnod game that also came out last year, Twin Mirror. And as someone who is autistic, I quickly played. When I played this game, I quickly knew, I was like, okay, Sam is an autistic person. They never really said he was autistic. I don't think they needed to, but the way they presented it, I was like, I am not okay with how they're presenting me. I don't like this. And I felt like after Life is Strange, I felt like Dontnod had a problem where it was like they wanted to introduce all these different ideas, all these different themes and political commentaries and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with like bringing like your own political commentary into like games and stuff like that, as long as you do it right. But when you focus more on commentary, social commentary, political commentary, or both, and then you take a back seat on the characters and the story, especially in genres like this where story is the key focus into keeping someone engaged, then I would rather you just didn't talk about whatever commentary you're trying to talk about at all, because it's like, clearly you're not prioritizing the proper things. So I was so glad that Deck 9 took this game back, because like I don't know if I had enough faith that Dontnod was going to make another good Life is Strange game.
No,
So
I agree with that. And I'm all in on Deck 9 now. Natalie, Bless, you got anything before we head out?
I think for me, like I'm surprised that a game could take me back to the magic of Life is Strange. Like I think there are often games that we play that are for us of the moment, or like I was playing this game and during this month and I was feeling a certain way, and that everything hit in a perfect way that made this thing really special for me. I think in the back of my head I've always had that thought of Life is Strange of, oh, maybe I played that game in the perfect moment, and even Before the Storm, right? Like maybe I love this so much because it's connected to this thing I love so much in this moment. And I think True Colors really disproved that for me. I think True Colors reminded me and recaptured the magic that I loved from the OG Life is Strange games, and the fact that like I'm echoing what you guys are talking about with Deck 9, right? Like I think I'm happy with what the future has in store for Life is Strange, with now it being in Deck 9's hands, because I think with this game they've really proven themselves to be understanding of what Life is Strange is, and they've proven that they got the stuff. Like they can tell a good story, they can innovate, because one thing we haven't mentioned is that this game looks really beautiful. Walking outside and looking around at the flowers and the flora and all this stuff, it looks phenomenal, and it is such a good step up from even the visual style of Life is Strange. So for the fact that they're able to take their own risks and take their own steps and innovate in their own ways, but make it something that still feels like it harkens back to the original games in a way that feels authentic and good, I'm blown away by, and I'm very much looking forward to the next either Life is Strange games or whatever Deck 9 does next. Like I think Deck 9 specifically has turned me into a fan with this game. I loved Before the Storm. I now love this one, and I'm like, cool, you guys have started a pattern. Make something else that I love.
Do it again.
Do it again.
I'm a big staunch Life is Strange 2 fan, so for me Life is Strange never lost its magic, but I was afraid of how that magic was going to be captured in Deck 9's vision. I think they somehow managed to strike a balance between really honoring the series and its legacy in so many small ways, but also building upon that with their own very distinct identity and idea of what this series is. Like I said, it's my favorite up there with Life is Strange 2. I adore Alex. I adore Steph. I love Wavelengths. Overall, I really loved this. Also came at a very pivotal moment in my life where like I really relate to Alex and what she's going through. I remember just like after I finished the main game and after I finished Wavelengths both times, I just kind of like sat there and like weeped at my desk a little because the thing about being a Life is Strange stan is like you meet these characters and you fall in love with them and then you have to say goodbye to them almost just as quickly because the nature of the series, especially when True Colors was first revealed, is that it's meant to be an anthology. So whatever Life is Strange game is next, which I imagine there will be, hopefully, it's not gonna be about Alex or Steph or Haven Springs. And part of me likes that, especially since I love these characters so much. So they're bound to do it again, make me fall in love with an entirely new cast. But I'm also gutted. Like, finishing Wavelengths for me was absolutely terrible because I was just like, oh no, and I have to say goodbye to Steph and I'm never gonna see her again and I have to rely on fan fiction to feed my soul and like, what if I never see these characters again? I'm just too emotionally attached to this series, but it's the series that has most personally transformed me and I'm just so relieved that True Colors was as amazing as it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm so excited for what's next in the series. Deck 9 has totally won me over. And I feel like this is the first, even though if you're listening to this, you finished it probably, or you're just like, I don't care. I just want to know what's going on with this game. This is the first Life is Strange game where I feel like I can recommend it with zero caveats. I do think there are flaws in the game, but before it was always like, some of the writing gets a little bit cringy or some of the plot points get a little or maybe there's some like warnings on how they approach certain subjects. But for this one, I'm like, it's just straight up good. It's one of the best of the year. Everyone needs to go play it. Before we head out of here, I'd love to hear from you all about things you want to plug, Twitter handles, whatever you got. So Blessing, anything you want to promote? And of course, we have links in the description as well.
People should check out PS Love You XOXO. That's our PlayStation podcast that Janet is a co-host on. That posts every Tuesday over on youtube.com. So it's kind of funny games and on podcast services around the globe. You can follow me on Twitter, at Blessing Jr. on Twitter. And I'm twitch.tv/Blessing Jr. on Twitch as well. If you want to watch me stream random video games. I've been playing a lot of Prey lately. And so I might play some Prey Moon Crash or Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, depending on how I'm feeling. Two very different games, but I like them both.
Natalie?
You can follow me at Heartymecia, that's HeartIMECIA on Twitter. You can listen to me talk about True Colors again on Waypoint Radio, and you can listen to me talk about it the first time on Fanbyte's True Colors Spoilercast. And you can read my review and my interviews with the developers. There's more interviews coming with people involved with Life is Strange True Colors over at fanbyte.com, where I am the featured contributor. So, yeah.
Nice. Taylor?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Taynixter. That is TAYNIXSTER. But if you want to hit me up or just like follow what I'm doing professionally, just go to IGN.com. I think y'all might be familiar with that website. Maybe not. But yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I talk a lot about gaming. Mostly right now I'm talking about Switch OLED because I reviewed that. So yeah, hit me up on Twitter if you want to talk Life is Strange or talk about how I love the slim bezels on the Switch OLED because they're just wonderful. But yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate the tech content. And for me, you can follow me on Twitter at GameOnysus. That's Game ONYSUS. I'm also on Twitch and YouTube and everywhere else on under the same platform, under the same handle. So definitely check that out. And of course, you can always catch me on the MinnMax show along with my other cohorts. Again, you can get this show in the podcast version if you go over to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Let us know what you think of Life is Strange True Colors, and we'll see you here next time. Bye.
If you are sick of snark, clickbait, and an avalanche of movie news, you can help support independent games media by subscribing to MinnMax's YouTube channel here or checking out the benefits over on Patreon. It's a nice, clean handshake. You support us, and we won't make dumb, condescending stuff for you. Your support helps us continue our mission of focusing on games, friends, and getting better. Patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. We'd appreciate it.